in prayer. And immediately after you hear it, we will hear the beautiful voice of Sister Heather or Mullins, who will be singing Give Them All to Jesus. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let us pray. Great God of the universe, we come to you once more in this fashion to give you thanks and praise for all that you have done for us. Lord, amidst the crisis, the coronavirus crisis, you have kept us alive and well. We want to give you thanks. Amidst all the turmoil, the chaos that's happening all across this globe, you've kept us alive to see another day. And oh Lord, for that we are very thankful. And as we come tonight, Lord, for this program, to learn more about the virus, the vaccine, and the variants, Lord, I pray that everything that is said today will be done decently and in order, and in the end that your name will be glorified. We will be edified, Lord, regarding this malady that has now affected and infected our land. We pray for the presenter as he leads out in the discussions, all the various participants, and everyone who is online today, Lord, that we will receive a rich blessing from this program. That when we leave here, God will be edified and well informed regarding this disease. And so, Lord, into your hands I present this program now, and I pray that you will lead out in the discussion. And at the end, Lord, we give you all the glory, all the praise, and all the honor. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Are you tired of chasing pretty rainbows? Are you tired of spinning round and round? Wrap up all the shattered dreams of your life, and at the feet of Jesus lay them down. Give them all, give them all, give them all to Jesus. Shattered dreams, wounded hearts, and broken toys. Give them all, give them all, give them all to Jesus, and he will turn your sorrows into joy. He never said there'd always be sunshine, and he never said there'd be no rain. He only promised a heart full of singing about the very thing that once brought pain. Give them all, give them all, give them all to Jesus. Shattered dreams, wounded hearts, broken joys. Give them all, give them all, give them all to Jesus, and he will turn your sorrows into joy. Give them all, give them all, give them all to Jesus. Shattered dreams, wounded hearts, broken toys. Give them all to Jesus. Oh, Amen. What a beautiful song. Thank you, Sister Heather. Um, it's always such a blessing to hear you sing. Um, well, it's time to dive into tonight's presentation and to introduce you the speaker. I will have two very special guests, and you may know who they are, the two lovebirds of Northwest Britain. And so I will invite Pastor Win and his lovely bride, Sister Jazan, to please open their mics and introduce to us tonight's speaker.
Thank you very much, Sister Rebecca, and good evening, everyone. I am just taking a scroll through my page to make sure that I'm not missing enough my colleagues. But I do see right here, I'm happy to see Pastor Ida Smith and her lovely husband. They are here joining us this evening. Welcome, Pastor. Nice to have you joining us here at Northwest Franco. Welcome, Brother Smith. Nice to have you, Elder, here with us too. And welcome to everyone here this evening. I know persons are joining us from all over the world right now, and we welcome you. But in a very special way, my task is to welcome our special guest this evening. And so my wonderful wife, my beautiful wife, will help me to do that. As you know, she has the duty, and so I will follow the duty at this moment. Amen. So let me begin to let you know more about our speaker, our presenter this evening. So our presenter is Dr. Wilmore Webley. And Dr. Webley is an associate professor of microbiology and the director of pre-med and pre-health advising at the University of Massachusetts, Amherst. Dr. Webley was born in Dry Hill District, Bellersgate, St. Catherine, Jamaica. And I'm sure the St. Catherine'ites are very, very proud this evening, and you ought to be. And was the first in his family to attend high school and college. He completed a Bachelor of Arts degree, a Bachelor of Science degree in medical technology at Northern Caribbean University. Dr. Webley earned the MSc and PhD in microbiology at the University of Massachusetts, Amherst, with expertise in immunology, infectious disease, and host pathogen interaction, with a concentration in vaccine development.
Dr. Webley is a Fulbright Scholar, a recipient of the Manning Prize for Excellence in Teaching, the Distinguished Teaching Award in recognition for outstanding teaching accomplishments, a recipient of the Black Student Union Award for outstanding devotion and dedication to the profession, and a Commonwealth Honors College Faculty Lecture Series awardee. He serves the UMass community in various capacities, including as a faculty senator and a member of the University Health Council. He also serves on the editorial boards of the International Journal of Vaccines and Immunization, the Journal of Medicine and Microbiology and Diagnosis, and Microbiology and Experimentation. He is a member of the International Society for Vaccines, American Society for Microbiology, and the Chlamydia Basic Research Society. Dr. Webley research focuses on infectious disease mechanisms and the role of specific infections in chronic diseases. Specifically, the Webley Lab is pioneering work in chlamydia vaccine development, using nanoparticles for delivery and the role of pathogenic microbes in asthma initiation and exacerbation. His laboratory was the first to culture chlamydia from lower airways of pediatric patients with chronic severe asthma, and has since shown that early life infection increases the risk for asthma onset and results in the unique asthma phenotype. His recent work has demonstrated the efficacy of antibiotics in treating a subset of severe asthmatics. His work has been published in reputable international journals and has made significant contributions to the field of microbiology, vaccinology, allergy, and immunology. Dr. Webley was recognized in national media coverage for organizing and moderating a panel on the 2014 Ebola outbreak that originated in Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone, and spread to several other countries, including the United States. He has made multiple presentations to various groups on the coronavirus pandemic, including radio shows, TV shows, YouTube, Facebook Live events. He has devoted significant amount of time to providing accurate information to counter myths and about the COVID-19 outbreak and vaccine safety and efficacy since the spring of 2020.
Having personally benefited from the remarkable generosity of excellent mentors, Dr. Webley is a staunch advocate for effective student mentoring, excellence in educational pursuits, and is a leader in student success initiatives. In his current role as Director of Pre-Med and Pre-Health Advising, he guides and mentors students in order to enhance their competitiveness for admission to medical, dental, physician assistant, and other health profession programs. This evening, we are happy here at Northwest Brampton to have Dr. Webley here with us. And we are grateful to have fellow Jamaican, an alumnus of Northern Caribbean University, our alma mater, and a brother of the faith. And indeed, that God has used him in mighty ways through medicine to bring the good news of salvation to the world. Dr. Webley, welcome to Northwest Brampton. We are truly happy to have you, and the floor is yours.
Good evening, Pastor Montague. Thank you so very much for having me. Thank you to you and your beautiful wife, Sister Montague, for the words of introduction. Thank you, Rebecca, for hosting and keeping us together. Good evening, everybody, all members. We are one under the umbrella of the cross. And so I come this evening to talk with you, to have a conversation with you. I have some slides that I will try to get through, at least some of them. And after that, hopefully some of the slides will answer some of your questions. And after that, we will have a discussion where I hope to be able to answer most of your questions in an honest and open way, and have a reasonable discussion about that. What do you say? All right. If you have the bandwidth and you can turn your camera on, I like to see faces. I teach, almost every day, and I have meetings, and one of the things I value is seeing people's faces. So if you're decent and you have your camera and bandwidth on, you can go ahead and do that. So I'll share my screen now as we get going. And hopefully you're seeing that. Let me just get a video panel here. All right, so I'll get that out of the way. Okay, all right, so just a few disclosures that I have no intellectual property interests in anything that I'll be saying here today. I'm not making any money, in other words, from any of the companies. I don't own stocks in any of them. I probably should have bought some stocks in Pfizer and Moderna, but I didn't. And so the other thing it is my goal this evening to explain the science to you. I'm a scientist and I believe in what I do, and it is my goal to explain the science to you, not necessarily to convince you to take the vaccine. I think taking a vaccine, I consider it to be a medication, and I think that's a very personal decision. It's something that you have to decide on. And so whatever you hear me say today, at the very end, just remember that when I think about it as giving you enough information so you can make an informed choice. I think what has been happening is a lot of people have been making choices about this vaccine without actually being informed, and that has caused a lot of problems and a lot of anxiety. So it is my goal to give you an opportunity to make informed choices about taking the vaccine, okay? So I want to start off by saying pandemics are nothing new. We have been going through pandemics for as long as the human race and our existence have been recorded, all the way back to the Antonine Plague. That's 165, 180, around that time, and 5 million people died from this plague. We're not exactly sure what it was, because at that time they didn't know about microbes. They didn't know what was causing what. But as far back as that, and you come closer, you can see that a lot of people, 200 million people died from the bubonic plague, one of the most devastating infectious diseases we've ever had. Maybe closer to our time, you had the huge cholera outbreak over Europe that devastated England, the UK. And then, of course, in 1918, we had the Spanish flu. Misnamed, of course, because it didn't start in Spain, but Spain at the time, World War I was being fought, and Spain was a neutral country and wasn't a part of the war. Other countries did not want to report the numbers that they were seeing. And as a result of that, their population, their people thought that they weren't having this issue, but Spain truthfully reported the number of cases that they were having. And so that's why the range is so wide. And if you go to other publications, they say anywhere from 50 to 70 million people died in the Spanish flu, a really devastating flu with a lot of commonalities to what we currently have. And then most of us have forgotten that HIV is actually a pandemic, not as easily caught as the coronavirus. It's a deliberate way to get it, but it is a pandemic. So in other words, we have dealt with and continue to deal with pandemics. However, the current one that we have is rather a terrible pandemic. And for those of us in infectious diseases, this really is one of the most formidable microbes we've ever encountered. So for years, we've known about coronaviruses as a family. In fact, in 1965 at the University of Chicago, they isolated these coronaviruses. And when they looked on the microscope, they saw them and saw that it looked like a crown. And that's how they got their name. It turns out that they never even thought of giving them regular names like the fancy names that we now have for the current outbreak. They gave them alphanumeric codes. The HCOV was added later, but they were just not named 229E and L63 because they cause a common cold. They cause a seasonal cold. So it's very likely that if you've been around for a while like me, you probably have encountered one of these coronaviruses at some point in time. So the difference is that those were never deadly. They never caused deaths. We never had to think much about them. But 3 times now, we've had coronaviruses enter the human population and have been deadly. The first time was in 2002 to 2003 when we had the SARS outbreak coming again from China. It very quickly became known that it was coming from bats, as most of these other coronaviruses have come from bats or some other rodent, came from bats down into the civet cat. And once they realized that the civet cat was an intermediate host, they started slaughtering these and getting them out of the population and stopping contact with them. And that literally ended this pandemic. It killed 800 and something people but infected 8,000 people. And you might look and think, oh, 8,000 people, 800 dead, that's nothing. We're getting more than that in a half a day. But you have to remember that this was a disease. These were microbes that were thought to be rather innocuous. And to see it spread so rapidly across the world, including in Canada and the US, killing people at 10% was rather jarring. And at that moment, I want you to remember this, at that moment, multiple scientists and multiple research labs actually started in earnest to try to make a vaccine against this family of microbes. And then almost when people forgot about it, funding kind of dried up and many scientists weren't researching it. In 2012, you had an outbreak of MERS, that's the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome coronavirus. And MERS is ongoing. We just haven't known about it because it turns out that it's transmitted from bats into camels and from camels to humans. It's not being transmitted human to human at this point. So if you are not in contact with camels, and especially with camels in the Arabian Peninsula, you probably wouldn't be in contact with this disease, but it has a mortality rate of 37%. So again, they started looking and thinking, we have to make a vaccine against these coronaviruses because the likelihood of them jumping into the human population, we call it a zoonosis, coming from animals to humans. We're not its natural host. Its natural host are these rodents and bats that it lives in without causing disease. It gets all of what it wants. It gets transmitted pretty easily. We become accidental hosts because of our contact with these microbes. So again, you would have seen this cartoon thrown around everywhere. Here is what we see under the microscope. And you can see the little spikes around it. And in Latin, corona means crown. And so that's where it got its name. Of course, the virus is SARS-CoV-2, severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2. And you can see why we just say SARS-CoV-2. I want to show you this diagram, this image actually. And this is an image of a cell, a human cell. This brownish purple blob is a human cell and it's dying. And the way I know it's dying is these blebs on it are unusual. It's typically fully rounded. And the reason why it's dying are these yellow dots on it. Each of those yellow dots is a coronavirus. I want you to keep that in mind as you think about people say, oh, you know, this virus is this or it's that. For an infectious disease specialist, when I look at this, it is really, really interesting that in less than 10 hours or just about 10 hours, this virus can do this. It has a burst size of about 1,000. So one virus gets into this cell. Within 10 hours, you have this. And this cell realizes that it can't do anything about its state, so it kills itself in a process called apoptosis, with the hope that if it dies, a lot of the viral progeny will die and would make it to new cells. And this is the way we were created. We're made that way, that when these cells get infected and they get overwhelmed, if they realize that they can't do anything about it, they kill themselves. And many times what they do, they take a lot of the microbes with them and they never get transmitted to new cells. So the current virus outbreak is thought to have started in Wuhan, China. Wuhan is a bustling city, huge hub. Lots of people come in and out of there. And at the time when this happened, it was close to the Chinese New Year when people were traveling a lot. One of the things that it's known for are these Chinese wet markets. And in these wet markets, you typically have meats and vegetables and fruit and everything that you can think of. You see, in the 1970s, when China was having a huge problem with feeding its population, it started allowing people to catch wildlife and to trade them in these markets and use them for food. And it became a bustling part of their economy. And this is an area where if you go in there, you will find meats from all different types of animals, everything from pangolins to bats to snakes to frogs, you name it, is sold there and traded there. And so just to give you a close-up of an area of the market, I'm not saying that every area looks like this. Here you have a chicken for sale, sitting on some vegetables, also for sale. Right down here, you have a tub of frogs also being sold for food. And what you'll see here, here's a man, and his job is to, if you come and you want your chicken or your frog or fish, which is in this lower bucket, slaughtered, he will do that and gut it for you, but he's doing it in the same container. If you notice, he doesn't really have latex gloves on. He has these nylon gloves on. Here is the bucket that he puts stuff in, and here's where they weigh them. Here's the cutting board up here that they cut everything on, right? So it's not a huge stretch of the imagination looking at the close proximity of everything, from the stuff that you're gonna cook really well to the stuff that you're not gonna cook at all. It's not a stretch of the imagination that you could possibly have a situation where a microbe that is in a wild animal, because a lot of these are wild caught animals, could actually get transferred over. It is still being investigated, but it is the thought of many scientists that this is how coronavirus got into the human population and spread. And today, we have 145 million cases worldwide, just under 146 million. Over 3 million people have died from this virus so far. And the pandemic is continuing. In many places, it's surging right now, even as other countries have started vaccinating wholesale. For you there in Ontario region, you have experienced the greatest outbreak in all of Canada, the greatest number of cases, the greatest mortality has happened there. Just a couple of days ago, you had over 8,000 new cases of the virus, 61 deaths. People continue to die from this disease everywhere you are. What you can see here is the demographics of the recent outbreak. It's very different from the initial outbreak that you had in Canada. So what you're seeing here is that 19 and 20-something-year-olds are accounting for the vast majority of this new outbreak, while the older population, the 60s and up, are accounting for less. And the reason for that is that these people down here, the older individuals, have been vaccinated. A significant number of them have been vaccinated. And as a result, they're avoiding this type of symptomatic infection. And not only that, not only are we seeing infections in this younger age group, we're seeing deaths in this younger age group. And so this disease is a respiratory disease mainly. And I say mainly because coronavirus can infect several other organs of the body. But it's mainly a respiratory disease. And essentially, when you inhale, air rushes down into your lungs. You inhale because you need oxygen. Oxygen is an important component in causing every part of your body to run. Your cells need it to metabolize. And so air rushes in, gets into these ear sacs in your lungs called alveoli. So it gets down into the bronchioles and branches out into these alveolar sacs. And what is unique about these little holes here is that they're completely surrounded by blood vessels. Right, so that you have blood vessels and you have the air and then you have the contact, and so oxygen gets into the blood, attaches to the hemoglobin on our red blood cells, and carbon dioxide is released. We exhale that, and we live. Right, this is a normal part of our existence that we don't think much about until we start losing the ability to breathe. Then we think about it. So when you have pneumonia, inflammation of the airways, especially the lower airways, what you have is that these sacs that typically, I describe them as feeling like bubble wrap. You know, if you ever felt bubble wrap when you get it in a package and you squeeze it, that's how these alveolar sacs are. They're empty, but they're fully inflated. When you have pneumonia, these sacs are filled with mucus because some of the cells in your lower airways, when inflammation comes about, they respond by producing mucus. The mucus is designed to trap the microbe and prevent it from easily going to other places. But essentially, this mucus now makes it very hard for oxygen to be exchanged. Oxygen can't diffuse through it, hence the difficulty breathing, and that's what actually have you ending up at the hospital. Now, typically, when people have pneumonia, they typically have it in one lobe of their lung, and certainly just one lung, not bilobal. But with coronavirus, it's been different. even in relatively mild cases, what we've seen is that we've seen almost a complete lung involvement. So here's a video. It's really a 3D rendering of a lung of a gentleman, the first case that came to the George Washington University Hospital. And those blue parts are normal areas of the lung. All of these yellowish green areas are areas that are filled with mucus, like you notice that it's on both sides of the lung, not just on one side. And this image was taken when this patient just came into the hospital, not when they were going on a ventilator. The patient was eventually placed on a ventilator and died of COVID-19, didn't survive. Because this is kind of what this virus does. It takes over the lung. And you have this consolidation. So this is a normal lung, right? So this is a CT scan. Normal lung. This is a lung with coronavirus, right? Both lungs completely consolidated. Now, here's the thing that you have to remember. When you make vaccines, the idea is that the vaccine prevents this from happening. No matter what the efficacy is that you're hearing about, the goal of a vaccine is to prevent hospitalization and severe disease and hospitalization. And this essentially is what it prevents. So the other thing is that we typically think about coronavirus in a binary way. We think about mortality and survival. We never think about morbidity. Morbidity are the conditions that you have that don't lead to death, but continue to be significant enough that you need care for them. So long COVID is what is used to describe the symptoms that people have sometimes months after they have recovered from this disease. Call them long COVID. And what are those? Lots of people, nearly 60% of people who recover from COVID feel some level of fatigue, and many of them for 3, 4, 5 months later. You add to that headaches. People are having loss of smell and loss of taste. People are nauseated. They have difficulty breathing. People have pain all over their bodies, chest pains. In fact, one of the new things that they've noticed about this COVID-19 is that when people get infected and they go to the hospital and leave the hospital, they're seeing a certain percentage of people returning to the hospital within 3 weeks to a couple of months, having new onset diabetes. This patient didn't come in with diabetes, never had diabetes before. Many of them no genetic predisposition to diabetes, but yet they come in with diabetes. And I'll explain a little bit more why. Here you can see the virus, these red areas is the virus right at the base of the brain, this olfactory bulb here, right at the base of the brain. Although we haven't seen it in a brain at this point, it's right there. No wonder the loss of taste and smell. COVID tongue, another thing that people have, these rashes on the tongue, you can see it there. Some people worse than others, right? This is happening. These are the morbidities. And then people developing gangrene because COVID causes blood clots, disseminated intravascular coagulations across the body. And so essentially, what you have is that the small blood vessels in the fingers and toes especially get blocked with blood clots. So oxygen can't get to these areas. And as a result of that, it dies off. And so these areas have to be amputated. Have to amputate these digits. So, we hear a lot about, yes, only about 2% of people die from COVID who get it. What we don't hear about is the tremendous toll that it has on people who actually survive. And what we do know is that a third of the people who survive COVID have some long-term effect that make them have to miss work. And up to 2/3 of people who have long COVID actually have some neurological or brain involvement, brain fogginess especially. Now, one of the things we do know is what actually increases mortality. We know that if people have hypertension, obesity, chronic lung disease like COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, diabetes, or cardiovascular disease, each of these increase your risk of mortality from COVID by varying percentages. Now, although hypertension increases your risk by 49%, and diabetes by 28%. When you put them together, they give you an overall condition of about 90% for having mortality from this disease, right? So a combination of these is dangerous. Now the variants add to the problem. And what are variants? Viruses do this all the time. This is an RNA virus, and they constantly make mistakes when they replicate. The goal of a microbe is to make more of itself. It doesn't mean to kill you. Have you ever watched that show with Steve Urkel, Family Ties? And Steve Urkel was clumsy, and he would knock stuff over, and then he would say, "Did I do that?" In my mind, when I see microbes and when they kill their host, I think that they say, "Did I do that?" They don't mean to. They don't want to kill you. Their goal is to make more of themselves. In fact, in microbiology, we say a successful pathogen never kills its host. It keeps you alive long enough so that it can continue propagating. But what we've had so far, we've had three main viral strains. This B117 variant from the UK, the P1 variant in Brazil, and the B1351 in South Africa that have proven really formidable. Every time the virus divides, every time it gets into a new cell or a new person, it makes errors as it's making its proteins. And every one of those errors has a probability of becoming a new variant. Of course, that doesn't always happen. And when the variants are made, they are not always successful. In fact, the vast majority of them are duds. They make something that is not as effective and it dies out. But every now and then the virus gets lucky and we have these variants. The problem is that even the vaccines that are made right now, the variants might be able to have evaded. That is not happening right now, but it could. And that is the issue that one would have. Now, these variants are able to make the virus more transmissible, to reduce antibody binding in the immune response, and also to reduce the effectiveness of the vaccines. And that is the challenge with these variants. Now, here is one case in Alberta, Canada, where there was a traveler who traveled out of Canada and got infected with one of the variants, the B117, took it back to Canada, did not obey the quarantine orders that they have there in Alberta, went and interacted with a colleague, and this person ended up infecting their mom and brother, and then actually met with a church leader, interacted with this church leader who was a counselor, counseled this couple. They both got infected, gave it to their son. Also, the church leader infected their partner with the virus. And so this is January 8. By January 15, the faith leader's daughter got infected and transmitted it to 3 people. By that time, the couple had not only infected their son, but a sister, the wife's sister, also a client that they work with, and then a co-worker for the husband. By the 22nd, this co-worker had infected another 5 people, and one of those co-workers infected another co-worker and a partner and a son and a mom. You see how quickly these things spread? And so now, instead of having one case of this variant, you have multiple cases of this kicked off this huge chain. And they will tell you, for contact tracers, they'll tell you that people who are in church leadership, people who congregate in churches are the most likely to transmit variants and to transmit the virus overall, because they interact with so many people in such a short period of time. So I showed you this virus, and I showed you these spikes. There's about 100 of them on its surface. It turns out that they're not just for decoration. They're not just a crown. They're actually the key that the virus uses to unlock our cells to get in. Okay, this is how the virus gets into our cells. So when you take this spike, if you notice closely, it's actually 3 proteins come together, right? 3 pieces of protein come together. So here it is in cartoon form. And this is what it uses. This is the key that it uses to unlock our cells. It turns out that the mere fact that you're a human being means that you have the lock for this virus, right? So people say, oh, you know, I believe in God and I have faith, so I can't get infected. No, no, no. You're a human being. It means that you have cells that are susceptible and vulnerable to this virus. They have what we call this ACE2, this angiotensin converting enzyme, that you need to balance your blood pressure and other things that happen normally in your body. It wasn't created for the virus. It's just the virus created a key that could unlock it, right? And so this is what the virus binds to in order to infect us. Now, I want you to look at the different organs and systems around the body that have this lock on them. And now you see why this virus causes such a wide variety of symptoms and cause such really terrible and long-lasting, oftentimes, sequelae after infection. So from your nasal passages, your eyes, your lungs, your back of your throat, your bladder, your kidney, and your pancreas as well. Remember, I talked about the fact that people have COVID, then they leave the hospital coming back with diabetes because it actually infects the islet cells in the pancreas. And these are the cells that produce insulin. So it destroys these cells and probably allow the immune system to further destroy these cells. And as a result of that, you can't produce enough insulin and you end up in problems, right? This virus is insidious. There are people who have gotten infected with this virus and have lost parts of their intestines, lost their kidney. They have to be on dialysis. This virus is nothing to joke around about, okay? So here are the variants again, and here is the spike protein of the B117 or UK variant. And what I just want to show you a little bit of biology. This was created by one of my former professors, Dr. Eric Marks, who was my immunology professor in grad school. And what he's showing you here, all of these black dots are mistakes that the virus makes. So think about the virus as writing a paper. It's writing an article. It has spell check on because it's a large virus, and it actually has a protein that checks for mistakes. It has spell check on, but each of these black dots is where it says made a mistake that wasn't caught. This purple area here is where the virus binds to our cells. And if you notice right in that region, there are 3 mistakes. Those 3 errors that the virus made in there are able to make this protein bind more tightly to our cells. And so it gets transmitted more readily. And it also makes this virus a little bit more deadly. But I want to show you how transmissible it is. This is in the UK, and this is November of last year, right? November 10th. And I want you to notice the change in color here, showing you when this virus actually, this strain of the virus, this variant of the virus actually took over. If you notice, in just a month, it overran the entire United Kingdom from not being there at all to overrunning it. And that's what's happening in the United States and Canada right now. The B117 variant is the most common one that we're seeing around. And so this was the UK initially, and then the B117 variant came in, and you saw what happened. And then they started vaccinating. It's in there. So I want to tell you a little story about what is happening in Brazil right now. In Manaus, Brazil, in October of 2020, they were just overrun with the original strain of the virus. We call the B variant of the virus that came out of Wuhan. In fact, for a long time, they were just having so many deaths. They were just having mass graves all over. And it turned out that when they looked, about 76% of the population had been infected. And then the number of cases dropped precipitously to almost nothing. Nobody was being hospitalized much. People weren't dying. They had reached what people thought at the time was herd immunity. This term that you're hearing. Herd immunity is the idea that if enough people in the population have been vaccinated and protected from the virus, it even protects those who have not been vaccinated so they don't get infected. It was a case study in real time looking at the control of this virus. However, in January, end of January, February, the number of cases started going back up, and so did the number of deaths and hospitalizations in Manaus. And the question is, well, what was happening? Well, it turns out that that coincided with that P1 variant of the virus. This P1 variant was not staved off by the antibodies that these people had produced against the original strain. And you see, that is why we're worried that with the vaccines that we have, if you have a new variant like the P1 variant that comes up, it might even evade the vaccine. That hasn't happened yet, but that definitely happened in real time in Manaus. And right now, this is what is happening in Manaus. They're using bulldozers and tractors and clearing forests. These are mass graves that you're seeing here. Let me show you close up, right? That is what is happening in Manaus right now. They have not been able to get a hold on this virus. So the WHO, the World Health Organization, says that the two public health interventions that have had the greatest impact on the world's population are clean water and vaccines. And I agree. Now, let me explain a little biology, a little immunobiology to you. And hopefully this puts in context why vaccines work and why they're necessary. When you're exposed to a microbe, any microbe at all, virus, bacteria, fungi, whatever, your immune system responds using an arm of the immune system called the innate immune system. You see, your immune system has two arms. It has the innate and it has the adaptive arm. The adaptive arm does not come on immediately because that would be like calling the SWAT team every time the alarm in your house goes off, or if you have a cat who has gone up in a tree. You call emergency services, the police and the local fire team comes, and they only call the SWAT team if something is too big to handle, right? I hope you're following this. In other words, your immune system was created in such a way that you're not calling in the army every time you have a little rustle in your house. That is not efficient. It is dangerous. When the army comes, they come with big equipment. It takes them a while to deploy, right? They destroy your flower beds and your streets with their tanks. You know, they have to set up camp somewhere and have, you know, a specific command post. It's a huge operation. And so the innate immune system is designed to keep things under control. This is like your local police group and firefighters, they take care of it. And so if a virus comes in, it is expected that the innate immune system should hold it down and cause that viral level to drop. And if necessary, if it doesn't get controlled, the adaptive immune system will kick in, but it takes approximately 2 weeks for that to happen. And this is across the board, not just for coronavirus, but for any virus. It takes about 2 weeks for your adaptive system to kick in. So this virus gets into your cells within 10 minutes of infecting you. So people say, oh, you know, what if I put steam up my nostrils? Well, the virus is already in your cells, so you'd have to kill your cells in order to kill the virus, because within 10 minutes, it is inside of your cells. It's obligate intracellular. Within 10 hours, it's making over 1,000 viral particles. And this is what is happening. This is the timeline I'm talking about. We're talking about antibodies because, you see, viruses are best dealt with by these Y-shaped proteins that our bodies produce called antibodies. Antibodies are a part of the adaptive immune system. So this down here is time, and where this peak is 2 weeks, 14 days. Now, it's really important that you follow me here. It will take 14 days, no matter if you're a vegetarian or you're a meat eater, no matter if your faith is strong in the Lord or weak, no matter if your parents and grandparents and great-grandparents were Seventh-day Adventists, no matter how many of Sister White's writings you have read, It does not matter. Biologically, it is going to take 2 weeks for you to have what is called a primary response. You cannot skip it because biologically you were made that way to protect your system, right? So this is why vaccines work. Because you see, for a virus like the current coronavirus, 2 weeks is too long. And that is true for the measles and the mumps and all of these other viruses that we have vaccines for. So what vaccines do, is that they fool the body into thinking that you're under attack. And so it makes this primary response, because look at the secondary response. You see the secondary response here, not only is it faster, what took 2 weeks here takes 2 days here, but it's a greater response. The numbers of antibodies that are produced are higher. And this is why they give you a booster with vaccines. You get the first shot, primary response, second shot. And that's why within 24 hours or so, 12 to 24 hours of getting the second shot, you start feeling sick, right? You start feeling a little fever and stuff. I was one of those when I got my second shot of the vaccine. I had a little fever, I had a little chill, and then it passed, right? Because my immune system is revved up. So again, if you've never been exposed to an antigen, in other words, a foreign entity, a virus before, no matter how healthy you are, you will only mount a primary response. For a virus like the coronavirus, you don't want to be mounting a primary response when you encounter it. You want to have antibodies, these Y-shaped proteins, that will bind to the spike protein of the virus and neutralize it and prevent it from binding to the ACE2. In other words, you want to tie up this spike protein. You want to put some duct tape over it so that it doesn't get to unlock your cells to get in. Why? Because for the coronavirus, here's its trick. Within 3 to 4 days of infecting most people, it starts causing mild to moderate disease. Within 8 to 10 days, you could end up in the ICU. Why would you end up in the ICU? Because that consolidation, that mucus that I talked about, has filled up your lungs already. You're already in deep trouble. And your adaptive immune system, your antibody levels have just started going up. That which is most necessary, the cheap ammunition of the immune system, is just getting fully deployed so that you can be protected. So severe illness would come prior to you having the full makings of your adaptive immune response. So a vaccine is not an alternative to your immune system. What it does is that it triggers your immune system against the microbe. So people think, oh, I'm either choosing God's immune system that is given me or the vaccine. No. Vaccines only work because of the immune system that God has given you. Antibiotics do not clear your infection. What they do is that they manage the infection. When I teach my students, I teach them that the only time we get disease is when the immune system is overwhelmed. It is so multi-layered, it is so well made that the only time we get disease, even in our sinful state, is when we get overwhelmed. And so what antimicrobials do is that they bring down the number of infectious microbes and bring them under control, and then the immune system takes care of it and clears them out of the system. Okay, even dead microbes have to go somewhere, and they have to go somewhere in an orderly fashion. It's their immune system that does that. Here's a good example of how vaccines work. 2 boys, both of them exposed to smallpox. On the same day from the same source. The only difference, this one on the right was vaccinated. His friend was not. And you can see the difference in the pustules. He will never be the same even though he'll survive. And so right now, that is why vaccines have been made against the coronavirus, because we know the value of them. So right now in the pipeline, phase 1 trial means this is just safety trial. There are 50 vaccine candidates in phase 1 trial right now for coronavirus vaccines. There are another 35 in phase 2 trials. Phase 2, you're still looking at safety, but you've added to the numbers. You have hundreds of people, and you're looking to see if there's some efficacy there along with safety. Phase 3 is the trials that you've been hearing much about, because these are your double-blind, case-controlled trials where you have tens of thousands of individuals, 30 to 40,000, people in these trials. They're randomized, half get the placebo and half get the vaccine. Neither the person giving it nor the person receiving it know what is what. They're blinded. And then you wait to see, is there a trigger point? In other words, when you have 1,000 people or 100 people who have been infected, the oversight board that is doing the study look to see who they are. You know, are they in the vaccine arm or are they in the placebo arm? And that's how they get these numbers of efficacy that we talk about. There are 5 vaccines that have been authorized fully, none in the US or Canada. There are 8 that have been approved, and 4 of them were abandoned for various reasons. So that's kind of the pipeline. And so here are the vaccines. The Pfizer BioNTech vaccine, it's a messenger RNA vaccine, so is the Moderna. Both of these are approved for emergency use in Canada. The AstraZeneca vaccine is a viral vector vaccine. It is also approved for use in Canada. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine is another viral vector vaccine. So it's on the AstraZeneca are the same thing in terms of the way they deliver the vaccine. So these are just vaccine platforms. It's how they're made. Okay, and that's also approved here in the US. It was stopped. Both the AstraZeneca and the Johnson & Johnson vaccine have been showing signs that a small number of people have these rare blood clots. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. And as a result of that, they stopped the distribution of that vaccine in the US until yesterday, when the CDC came back and said, we will continue to vaccinate people. If you notice, there are a number of other vaccines. This one, Sputnik 5 in Russia. China has vaccines there that they're giving to their people. It turns out that those vaccines have been put in more people than the ones that we have here. And then, of course, India. So the mRNA vaccines, essentially what they're doing is that they're taking the code that's codes for this spike protein that I've been talking about, right? There's a genetic code. The same way you have an alphabet with a word, there's a genetic word that translates into this spike protein. So they take that genetic word, mRNA, they put it in nanoparticles, lipid nanoparticles. And by the way, lipid doesn't mean pork. It's just fat, just fats. And that is injected into an individual. It's picked up, read in the ribosomes, the protein making factory, and then made into the protein that it's codes for. That protein gets released into the body. The immune system sees it and makes an immune response against it. Okay. For the viral vector vaccine, what they do is that they get a virus. They get the same code that is over here, but this time they're not putting it in nanoparticles and putting it in. They get a virus that can't replicate, but can still infect, and these are adenoviruses, these are cold viruses. The Johnson & Johnson use a human one, and the AstraZeneca uses one from a chimpanzee, right? Just a cold virus. It's gutted. It's a virus. It can infect us, can't do anything, can't cause disease. And when it does is that it gets injected in you. And when it gets injected inside of us, it actually gets into the nucleus of the cell where it delivers this piece of DNA. That gets read and a messenger RNA is made from it. That messenger RNA goes into the cytoplasm where it gets read by the protein making factory, and proteins are made, same spike proteins. Those spike proteins are made and poured out into the surrounding so that immune cells pick them up, and the immune cells now are able to deliver them where they need to be in the lymph nodes, where B cells and T cells respond to them, and you get antibodies made. So essentially, let me explain a little bit about this to you. Here's a cartoon of a cell. This purple blob here is the nucleus of the cell. This is where DNA lives. The cell thinks that this DNA is so important that it never lets it out of the cell. As a result of that, whenever a protein needs to be made, because your proteins are the workhorses of the body. It is proteins that you use to digest your food. It is proteins that you use to do anything at all that you need to do. It was proteins that rushed to the neuromuscular junctions so I could lift my arm just now, right? It is proteins that make up the tissues, the cells of my body. Proteins are constantly being broken down and need to be renewed. right? So the body has this genetic code in your DNA that codes for proteins, and they can carry out the functions. Your immune system made up of proteins. Proteins get triggered to tell the immune system. The body, the cells of the body communicate through proteins. Proteins are what the body uses to send text messages to each other, right? To the cells in the body. So proteins are what are your goal, but the instruction, the code for these proteins are sitting in the nucleus of your cell. So the way I like to describe it to people who are non-scientists is, I don't know if you remember those days when we used to have to go to the library for books, when everything wasn't on the internet. But there were certain books that you couldn't take out of the library. You remember that? These books were on reserve. It means that the number of copies that the library have were limited, maybe 1 or 2. So let's say that you are going to make a special pie, and the recipe for this special pie is sitting in your local library in one of these rare books that you can't take out of the library. So you go to the library, you borrow the book off reserve. Typically you get like an hour or 2 hours with the book. And what you do is that you go into the directory and you find the page or the pages that have the recipe for your pie. The book has several other recipes, but you have a specific pie in mind. That would be equivalent to a gene, right? A gene, which is a segment of this DNA. The nucleus would be the library. And now you're not going to sit around the library looking at this book. You photocopy the pages with the recipe, and you take it out of the library and take it to your kitchen. And your kitchen are these little factories here called ribosomes. So that's essentially what it is. The photocopy is the messenger RNA. That's all that the messenger RNA is. It's a copy of a gene carrying the instructions to make the particular protein. And the protein is made right out here in this outer compartment called the cytoplasm. And here are the ribosomes. It turns out that the virus knows this. All viruses know this. Viruses infect our cells because they're what we call obligate intracellular. They do not have the ability to make their own proteins. So they get into our system and they say to our protein making factory, hey, can you make these proteins for me? So our bodies make the proteins for them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so essentially then, that is exactly what these vaccines are doing. The people who made these mRNA vaccines just copied exactly what the virus does. The difference is that the virus caused the cells to make every protein that it has. Coronavirus has 30 proteins. And when it gets into your body, it tells your body to make all 30 of them. These vaccines are strategic. They tell the body to only make what they need, the spike protein, because that's all we need to protect you from. That's what neutralizes the virus. So essentially, again, here's the genetic material for the virus. You create a DNA template of it so you can make multiple strands of mRNA. You encapsulate that into a nanoparticle. Why? Because over years of testing this, and if you notice I say years of testing, it turns out that they didn't start testing mRNA vaccines when the coronavirus came about. These are things that have been in development for 20-something years, right? I've been teaching about this for years, right? So they encapsulate it because if you put the mRNA into the system by itself, the body deletes it. It degrades it, breaks it down. And I want you to notice that because people say, oh, is the mRNA going to sit around forever? No, no, no. It gets broken down in a very short time. Have you ever watched Mission Impossible? When it gets a message, it self-destructs in 5 seconds. That's exactly what happens to the messenger RNA. Not in 5 seconds, a little longer than that, but it gets degraded in a relatively short period of time. It's not sitting around in your body. So is true for the protein that it codes for, by the way. So look at what happens. It gets in, gets picked up, cells process it, makes this protein. Here's a spike protein on the cells, not on the virus now, on the cells. The body sees it. The immune system attacks it and make these Y-shaped proteins called antibodies that bind to the virus to these spike proteins, and also bind to any virus with those spike proteins that would come in. Let me show you how that is done in a video format.
mRNA technology has never been used before in an approved vaccine, but scientists are using it now to combat COVID-19. mRNA, or messenger ribonucleic acid, are snippets of genetic code that tell cells to build proteins. mRNA vaccines take advantage of that protein-building process to trigger an immune response and build immunity to SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19. Instead of using a small dose of live or dead virus like some other vaccines, mRNA vaccines use a tiny piece of the virus's own genetic material. Here's how it works. This is the virus. These are called spike proteins. Scientists have isolated the genetic code for those proteins, a set of instructions that are put into the vaccine so your body knows how to make them. Your immune system won't make an actual virus particle, but it will make copies of the angry red spike protein. In other words, no gray ball, but an angry red spike. Once vaccinated, your body starts making those spike proteins so your immune system will develop antibodies to fight the real thing, SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19. The Pfizer and Moderna vaccines that are created for COVID-19 will be the first licensed mRNA vaccines ever.
Okay, so remember I was telling you that the mRNA technology has been around for a long time. This is a paper published in the journal Science in 1992, February of 1992. See what he's talking about? This idea of mRNA technology. Bring it a little closer. This is 2017. This is a paper that was published in Lancet Journal looking at an mRNA-based vaccine for rabies. They were in phase 1 clinical trial, which means that it was already in humans, right? Phase 1 in humans. Here's another one trying to make a mRNA flu vaccine. This is in the year 2019. This is before the coronavirus came about. Just showing you that this technology has been around. This is an mRNA vaccine for Zika virus, right? Being made by Moderna. And this is in the year 2020, but this is April of 2020, which means that the research couldn't have started in 2020. This was a phase 1 clinical trial in humans. The research would have had to start many, many years before, right? January of 2020, a cytomegalovirus vaccine, mRNA vaccine. You can see that it's in Cambridge Business News because Moderna was looking at that. And here, this is a 2018 review in the journal Nature Reviews Drug Discoveries, where they're saying mRNA vaccine is a new era in vaccinology. Again, I told you I've been teaching about this because it's been around. This old idea of a DNA and RNA vaccine has been a very attractive thing for immunologists and vaccinologists for a long time, because the idea is that instead of you trying to make these vaccines, make these proteins, trying to purify them, trying to bulk them up, if you can get the body to make it for you, what could be more efficient? So the ideas have been around for a long time. Now, the other thing is that when you say nanoparticle, I've seen on Facebook, people are saying, oh, you have to be very careful of these vaccines because they're using nanotechnology. And, you know, I'm like, yes, they are. What is wrong with nanotechnology? People have turned it into some weird thing that you're using nanotechnology. And I'm like, all that it means is really small stuff. You can make a nanoparticle out of anything, right? If you pound sand small enough, you could make nanoparticles out of it. So nanoparticle is just describing the size of a particle. So here's a baseball bat. It's about 1 meter.
Get on.
In length, right? About 1 meter. A dime is about 1/100th the size of that. A millimeter is 1,000th the size of a meter. And then you get to micrometer. A micrometer is 1,000,000th the size of a meter. It turns out that the same people who say, oh, they're using micro technology or using nanotechnology for these vaccines say, oh, by the way, don't take the vaccine because the government has put microchips in them. Have you heard that? You know, the government has put microchips in it. So I'm going to show you how foolish this is. Here is your microchip size, right? a millionth the size of a meter. But look at nanoparticle. A nanoparticle is a billionth the size of a meter. Over 1,000 times smaller. In other words, what they're really telling you is that the government is putting something that's really large into something that's really small. You don't have to go to college to know that this can't be true, right? So all I'm trying to say to you is that all that is happening is that they're encapsulating the mRNA, which is a fragile piece of genetic information, into these really small particles that they use really cool technology to create. It's a billionth the size of a meter. That's all that nano means, right? It's not some nefarious government conspiracy. Now, what is in these vaccines? That's important to know. I'm going to try to wrap up in the next few minutes. It has the mRNA in there. The mRNA was made in a lab, right? Created through plasmids of the spike protein. It has these lipids that surround it. And if you notice, it's various types of lipids that they've combined. It has polyethylene glycol to hold all of this together. It has salts and sugar. The salts here is really saline, 0.9% saline, right? That's why it's diluted in when these mRNA vaccines, and this is true for both of them, right? That's what is in them. They have different types of lipids, but lipids nonetheless. What are the side of these vaccines? Remember, these are medications. They have side effects, right? So 84% of people who get the Pfizer vaccine have pain at the injection site or some type of reaction. Could be a swelling, could be a pain. 91% of people who take Moderna have the same thing. 62% of people have fatigue. Another 55% have headache, muscle pain, chills, 31%. I was one of those people who had chills, feeling really cold for a while after I got the second shot, first shot, nothing. And so these are the side effects of these vaccines. A few people have had what we call anaphylaxis. This is a whole body reaction to the vaccine. I think it probably is in the order of maybe under 100 people have had these since the vaccine has been widely distributed. And essentially, these individuals have to be given an EpiPen because it means they are allergic to something in the vaccine. It's not clear what it is, but now they actually ask you what is in there. For the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, I explained to you how that is formed, so I'm going to skip this. But in Canada, the frequency of events, adverse events from the vaccine, is really site at the injection site pain, right? You can see the number of people here. Redness at the injection site, swelling, people having fatigue and rash and fever. These are the regular things that are expected from the vaccine that you're seeing here. Now, pretty much all of these vaccines surpass the threshold to be recommended by the WHO. The World Health Organization say if you make a vaccine that has 50% efficacy, in other words, 50% of the people who get it do not have symptoms, then that vaccine is marketable, right? All of these vaccines far exceed that. But you can see that some of these vaccines, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, for example, especially when you put it in the context of the variants, it's about 66% efficacious. The Moderna and Pfizer are in the 94, 95%. The Sputnik 5 is the Russian vaccine. This is what they're reporting as an efficacy for the Novavax vaccine, and the AstraZeneca vaccine have good efficacy. Now, I understand why people are resistant to vaccines. It's a combination of things. It's how we're treated as a people when we go to the doctors. It's how we're treated in scientific experimentation. And it's also a history, especially for people of color, where in 1932, 600 African-American men, for example, in Macon County in Alabama, were told that they were a part of a study about insurance, but they were actually put in a study because they had syphilis. And the experimenters, the American government, Health and Human Services, wanted to see what happens when syphilis is allowed to take its course in these men. And these men, for 40-something years, in what is called the Tuskegee syphilis study, suffered from syphilis even after penicillin became widely available and was very effective at treating syphilis. They were actively prevented from accessing it. And not only did some of these men die, some of their family members got syphilis and died as well. And also, J. Marion Sims has been lauded as the great pioneer in gynecology and gynecological surgeries. Many of his techniques are used today widely. What is hardly reported is that Marion Sims tried his techniques on African-American women, slave women, without anesthesia. Exploitation of African-Americans and other people of color. And of course, probably widely known, if you have read The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, you know about this woman in Baltimore in the 1950s, early 1950s, who came down with cervical cancer. Cervical cancer is often caused by the HPV virus. And they took her cells before she passed away and commercialized it. This was how tissue culture started. I have some of these same HeLa cells in my lab today that my students are growing and using for our own experiments. But her family didn't know about this. And it made billions of dollars. Billions of dollars. In fact, when I bought my sample of HeLa cells many years ago, it cost my lab $500 for 1 milliliter of it. Okay, $500 for 1 milliliter. Her family got nothing. They lived in poverty, died in poverty, not realizing that this had happened. So yes, there is hesitancy. Over 1 billion doses of vaccines have been given out worldwide, but there's still people who are hesitant to get vaccinated. Do the vaccines work? Absolutely they do. Here are people in a hospital setting here in the US and Texas, the rate of infection in people who didn't get vaccines. And here is that people who got 1 dose of the vaccine and those who got 2 doses of the vaccine. Clearly, you can see it's the same number of people who are in this arm of the study. But here you have 234 getting infected. Here you only have 4, right, who were vaccinated. The vaccines work. In Britain, we see people, new cases of the virus plummeted in people 85 years and up. New hospitalizations plummeted, and so the deaths after they started giving out the vaccine. Same thing has happened in the United States. 1/3 of the deaths from COVID-19 last year in the United States was in nursing homes. In Massachusetts, here where I live, we had a nursing home that was decimated by coronavirus deaths. Probably one of the worst outbreaks in the entire country. Happened just up the road from where we live. But today, that number of cases, number of deaths, number of hospitalizations have plummeted in that age group. It is very rare to hear of anybody dying from coronavirus in there. So what is it that we're trying to get? We're trying to get to what is called herd immunity. The whole idea that if you have nobody who's vaccinated and you get an outbreak, just watch the animation, everybody is going to get infected at some point or another, unless there are mitigations put in place. If 20% of the people are vaccinated, those in green, you have some level of protection, but you still have the vast majority of people getting infected. You don't get any real break until you're about 80 something to 90%, where you start actually stopping the spread of this virus. This is what we call herd immunity. It's the idea of putting a break between you and the virus. You know, now when they're making sustainable rainforests, they don't just plant trees continuously. What they do is that they plant trees and they have a big space with no trees in blocks. And then they plant more trees. Why? That if they have a forest fire, it might burn one section, but never get to the next section. That's exactly what herd immunity is. If you get vaccinated, you become that break in the forest so that the forest fire doesn't catch the other part, especially people who cannot get vaccinated overall. So I'm going to stop there now, and I'm happy to take your questions if you have them, if they haven't been answered through the presentation.
Okay, can we just, I just want to set some guidelines as we get ready for the questions, Dr. Webley. So what is going to happen? We are going to ask persons to just indicate by raising your hand so that we can recognize you and take your question. We are going to be asking that, and we know this platform, Dr. Webley, supposed to be mostly Christians. And so we know that these are orderly people, right? And so we expect to go in that regard, and that everybody will be respectful of each other's question. That is going to be very important. And so, Dr. Webley, I just want to ask that the co-host will help us to identify the hands and tell us who next will be speaking, so we can go in that order. Thank you very much.
I see Sister Cheryl has raised her hand. Sister Cheryl Bailey.
Yes, my name is Dalton Bailey. I'm the one who want to ask the question. And my question is about, in my workplace where I work, there are, let's say since COVID-19 started, at least 20 people who they told us that these people tested positive of the virus, and they send them home. And after 2 weeks, these people are back at work, seems quite normal, and everything is okay again. So if it is so dangerous as, how come these people tested positive and 20 people sent home, then next 2 weeks, these 20 people is back at work, just normal as ever? So I just give me your feedback on what's going on in this case when they're tested positive. Many people go home and they're back to work in 2 weeks and everything is dandy shandy again.
Yeah, because that's what happens. 98% of people who test positive for the virus or get the virus recover. The vast majority of people don't die from the virus, and the vast majority of people don't have symptoms from the virus. This is very much age dependent, and dependent also on the underlying conditions that you have. If somebody has none of the underlying conditions that we talked about, the diabetes, the hypertension, and all of these things, it's very likely that these individuals, if they're young and healthy, will survive the virus. And that's what we see. I mean, again, I've seen the same thing. I've known lots and lots of people who got infected with the virus and are fine. I mean, I'm around students at the university. We had an outbreak on our university campus, and tons of students got infected. The vast majority of them are fine. I mean, they will complain that they still are not, their taste and their smell is not fully back, that every now and then some of them talk about being fatigued, but by and large, it's what we expect. However, it doesn't mean that this is not a dangerous virus. It's a numbers game, right? When you're talking about, if you're talking about an outbreak in a small group, and it's just 1%, you might be talking about 1 or 2 people. But one of the things that I showed you at the top of the program is that over 3-point-something million people worldwide have died. Over nearly just under 600,000 people in the United States alone have died from this virus. So clearly this is a significant and severe virus overall. But I'm not surprised that your coworkers were able to recover. Hopefully that means that they're just in good health. And they got the virus. Their immune system was able to clear it in a relatively short period of time. They didn't have to go into the hospital, and we thank God for that.
So in that case, then I would say that it could take the worst if you're infected and you get really sick, then it can be very dangerous. That's what I'm learning. So therefore, the vaccine is prevention is better than cure, because you don't know what side of the spectrum you're going to be on if you get the.
Exactly. The idea is that many people didn't even realize they had underlying conditions until they got infected with the virus and ended up in the hospital realizing, oh, I had diabetes. I didn't know I had diabetes. Oh, I was hypertensive. I didn't know I was hypertensive. And so the virus sends them to the hospital and they realize that they had these underlying conditions. And since we don't know, and moreover, it's still just been a year. We're still learning about this virus. We're still learning about what it is that serve as an underlying condition that make this virus worse. And so we don't know if there are other things that make a viral infection worse at this point. And so the question is, if you have a vaccine that you can take that prevents you from getting severe disease in the first place, remember the vaccine doesn't prevent you from becoming infected. What it does is that it prevents you from having disease when you become infected, because no vaccine prevents you from becoming infected. And so if you have a vaccine that is able to prevent that and it's safe and it's efficacious, then certainly you want to be able to take that.
Yeah, my question is answered. I'm very satisfied with the presentation and the information that have come.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Bailey. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I saw Jean Lazarus.
My question is, if someone has been tested positive for COVID-19 and they recover and they didn't have the vaccine before they were positive, how soon after their recovery are they able to take the vaccination?
Very good question. Initially, they had said about 3 months, but since then they have revised that to about a month or so after. So you can wait 30 days and then get the vaccine and you should be fine. The reason why they don't want you to get the vaccine right away is that it's very likely that you've made antibodies against the spike protein, even though it might not be a lot, you have them. And what those will do is that when the spike proteins are produced by the cells that got injected with the mRNA or whatever type of the vaccine you got, the antibodies that you already have could neutralize those. It could bind them up. And then the immune system doesn't get to see it to know that it's there, so it ramps up. So the idea is that you wait a little bit, it starts going down, peaks around 2 weeks, starts going back down. So by 30 days to 40 days or about, it would be a good time you can get the vaccine.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Ona Thompson.
Hi, Wilmore, how are you?
I'm good.
I don't have a question, I have a comment. I have been in healthcare for over 20 years, and I have dealt with a lot of corona patients. Maybe I'm not dealing with them fully now, but when I were like last year, I saw what the virus does to the lungs.
Mm-hmm.
I go in to take care of a patient that we may be having 2 liters of oxygen, and in a short time we have to high flow or they're intubated. So this is not a virus that we play with. A lot of people have not really studied the vaccine because the vaccine is new. We don't know much about it. You deal with these things on a higher level and you don't fully understand how everything works because it's new. And I hear a lot of people, they're talking that people who died because of the vaccine. I just want to give you an example. My husband, last week, he had a dizzy spell and he went to the hospital. We didn't know that he could almost die from a heart attack. He had 99% blocked artery. Now, if my husband had taken the vaccine the day before, you know what people would say, not me, I'm in healthcare and I know better. They would attribute his death to the vaccine. And they would say, oh, it's that Johnson & Johnson or it's that Pfizer. So I'm just saying, a lot of people have underlying conditions or health problems they don't know of. We didn't know my husband had a 99% blocked artery. He got 2 stents the same day in the hospital. So I think we need to be very cautious, especially those who use these platforms that they have so many erroneous things saying without any proper research, and they're stopping people from getting help that need help. I take the vaccine because I'm a healthcare worker and I believe I need to be protected. So I just ask you all that you read, you do your research, you get informed before you spread a lot of rumors, because it's not so nice because there are many gullible people around. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nurse Rona. It's good to hear your voice. Thank you so much for your comments. You're very right.
Thank you.
Vaccines is a numbers game. It's a numbers game. It's very different when you're giving millions of people something versus a handful of people. And she's right that, if I come and I give out 1 million candy bars, or no, if I give out 1 million veggie chunks to people, in 2 days, it is very likely that 14,000 of those people would either become very deathly ill or die. Does it mean that the veggie chunks caused their death? Absolutely not. A lot of those people are going to die anyway, right? And so people attribute things to vaccines. There's a difference then, as Nurse Thompson was saying, there's a difference between dying after you got the vaccine and dying from the vaccine. Huge difference. People will die after getting the vaccine. They were going to die anyway. They would have died from accidents, whatever it is. It's a big difference from dying from the vaccine, which is a very different thing. And that's why they keep on studying these vaccines.
Next question, Sister Rebecca.
Thank you, Dr. Webley. I've got a DB tablet with her hands up for a while.
Yes, good evening, Doctor. Excellent presentation and very informative. My question is, if I should take the vaccine, does it mean that I'm immune from catching the coronavirus? That's one. And two, with the new variants of disease that is out there now, will this vaccine prevent me from contracting those new variants?
The first part of your question, I didn't get.
The first part is, if I take the vaccine, am I immune from getting the coronavirus, or can I take the vaccine and still get coronavirus disease?
Yeah, got it.
And the second part is, with the new variant, does the vaccine immune from contracting those new variants?
Yeah, so, as a scientist, I hear words and I have to pick them apart. Vaccines do not prevent you from getting infected, right? So none of these vaccines, no vaccine that has ever been created prevents you from becoming infected with the agent that you're vaccinated against. So will you get infected with coronavirus if you have gotten the vaccine? If you're exposed to it, you absolutely will. But the vast majority of people won't know if they have gotten vaccinated. They won't know that they got exposed to coronavirus. Why? Because they won't get sick. They won't get symptoms. That's what the vaccine is designed to do. It's designed to reduce symptoms and prevent serious disease, death, or hospitalization, right? And for the variants, the vaccines that we currently have, all three of them give you a measure of protection against the variants, not full protection. Because especially mRNA vaccines, the Moderna and Pfizer, they were created before these variants came about. So they weren't made against these variants. It turns out that they do work very well against some of these variants, not as well against the Brazilian and the South African variant, definitely really well against the UK variant, which is what we're experiencing now. Now, both of those companies have gone back and they've recreated vaccines to work better against the variants. And they're now testing those. And the hope is that if we got overrun by one of those variants, they would come and give us a third shot so that we would be protected against them. And so it's a moving target when you have a pandemic that is still ongoing. However, but to answer your question succinctly, yes, you can still get infected having been vaccinated. However, you won't get sick. In the 95% of the cases, you won't get sick and have to be hospitalized, because that's what the vaccine is designed to prevent.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So we've got a question in the chat from Florence. And are there any of the long COVID-19 symptoms?
Yeah, I see that question in the chat. If any of the long COVID is reversible. Yes, I mean, for some people, it goes away on its own. Interestingly, data has recently surfaced that shows that people who get vaccinated, their long COVID symptoms go away for many people. So there haven't been a peer-reviewed publication on it yet, But there is good anecdotal evidence, there's good evidence overall that the vaccine seems to get rid of the long COVID symptoms in many people. And what that says to me is that the virus might still be around in some of these people who have long COVID and is being drained now that you're vaccinated.
Thank you, Doctor. We'll go to Audrey Barrett, and then it will be Dr. Cornish.
Good night. Excellent presentation. My question is, I have a daughter who troubles with seizure. Can you advise me about her taking the vaccine? I'm from Jamaica.
Yeah, I think you should talk with her doctor about that. That seemed like it's very specific. I don't know what the cause of the seizure is or anything like that. So I can't advise you carte blanche that it would be safe for your daughter. You have the equivalent of the AstraZeneca vaccine there. And depending on what caused her seizure initially, maybe your doctor would have misgivings about the vaccine. I don't know. I haven't seen any much data on people who have had seizures and who got the vaccine. So I think it's something that you want to have a frank conversation with your daughter's doctor about. But in the meantime, keep her safe, keep her in a mask, keep her distance from everybody else, and make sure that she's safe until you figure this out.
I have been doing that. Thank you.
You're welcome. All the best.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Webley. Could you please enlighten us as to why it is important to take the second vaccine? I've had people saying that, oh, I've had one vaccine already, and I don't think I need to go and take the second one.
Yeah. Yeah, so the second dose of the vaccine is important because, you know, we hear about the clinical trials, right? These phase 3 clinical trials. And in the clinical trials, what they found out for the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine and many of the other vaccines, except for the Johnson & Johnson, is that when they tested it, after the first dose, you had a certain level of protection. But this 90-something% efficacy and 80-something% efficacy that they're talking about, you only got that after the second dose. In other words, when I showed you that graph of the immune system, you had that initial primary response, and then you needed a booster in order to get that second response so that you have enough antibodies in the system where you would be able to protect yourself. Right, so you do need that second dose of the same vaccine because while they're testing mix and matches in the UK, they haven't tested it anywhere else, and they're still not gotten a final thing. So you need to go back and get the second dose of that same vaccine to ensure that you're properly protected.
Thank you. Okay, a second question is just to let us know a little bit about the immune thrombocytopenia that has been attributed to the death of a doctor in the USA and as it relates to COVID-19.
Yeah, so these are rare events that there's no way, Dr. Cornish, that we would have known about them in the clinical trials. Because what we're seeing is that we have 7 million or so Johnson & Johnson vaccine doses delivered, and we're having 6 or 7 cases of people who have had these clots. In other words, they're extremely rare. It is not clear to me what is going on. My speculation is that there is some underlying condition that causes people to have a type of immune response that leads to thrombocytopenia or a depletion of their platelets. And it's kind of almost counterintuitive that you're having a clotting issue, but at the same time, one of the main factors for blood clots, which is your platelets, is low. So it seems as if it's a consumptive kind of thrombocytopenia where the platelets are being used up and pulled out of the system to probably form a lot of clots. I don't know. There seems to be, for those who are scientifically inclined, antibodies against platelet factor 4. right? The platelet factor 4 activation seems to be happening, and there seems to be specific antibodies in these individuals to platelet factor. That's extremely specific. And what it says to me is that these individuals could possibly have gotten some other viral infection in the past, or some other event happened that caused them to be sensitized to make antibodies against these self-proteins. And now they're having some form of almost autoimmunity. And when the immune response is made against the vaccine, that gets triggered. It's what we call a promiscuous type of antibody response, or cross-reactivity, where antibody molecules, these Y-shaped proteins, while they're specific, they're also able to, especially when they're made against carbohydrates or sugars, they're able to bind to something that they weren't made to because it looks so close to what they were made to, in other words. So a part of the spike protein could have induced a type of antibody that looks so close to a protein that they already have that is binding to it on the platelets and causing issues. And so, to be honest, I would have loved for them to figure out what that was and exclude those people from getting the vaccine before they restarted giving it back out. Because, I mean, for me, vaccines are supposed to be really safe, and even having 7 or 8 people getting deadly ill is still too many in my sphere. However, when you give something like a vaccine, it's a risk-benefit ratio, and the benefit of the vaccine outweighs the risk at this point of developing a blood clot, because they're so very rare.
Thank you so much, Dr. Webley. And just to add to that, and then I'll allow someone else to ask a question, that vaccines, they're not the only kind of medication that can cause drug-induced thrombocytopenia. So the penicillins, quinine, quinidine, ranitidine, the sulfonamides are out there, and they're being used every day. And people have gotten drug-induced thrombocytopenia, and that's the blood clots that can lead to death. So for all medications, there is a slight risk, a slight chance of adverse reaction or side effects. And there we have to put our trust in God and be guided by experts like Dr. Webley. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cornish.
Thank you. Yes, so we do have some returning people. I will call Sister Cheryl Belly, Jim Lazarus, and then Kenesha Boswell Ellis.
My question is it true that after someone has been tested positive for COVID-19, had symptoms, that they will continue to be testing positive for the following 3 months?
No. I mean, we've seen it in a few people. My wife specifically saw this in some nursing home patients that she took care of. It's not clear why they continue to test positive, but again, seeing long COVID, it's very likely that these individuals have some amount of virus still in their system. But the vast majority of people stop testing positive after 10 days or so. The virus is just not in the nostrils anymore. Doesn't mean it's gone away from your body, but it's not in the nostrils anymore, which is where the swab is, where you get tested. And so, you know, it's one of those things that the virus transitions. You know, it very quickly leaves the lungs and go into the rest of the body. As I showed you, there's several other body sites that it can infect. But after a week or so, the virus should no longer be shed, especially if you're getting better in your nostrils.
Okay, I asked that question just because there was a situation. I work at a hospital, and a patient of ours called us and told us that that's what she was told at the clinic where she went to get tested. She was told that she was coming to have her baby. She doesn't need to tell us that she doesn't need to be tested anymore because she's had symptoms, they went away, and so she will be testing positive, but she's not contagious.
No, not with the test that we use. The test that we use is the PCR test, polymerase chain reaction, which means they are looking for the presence of the virus through its nucleic acid material. If you're doing an antibody test, which is your immune response to the virus, then yes, you would test positive. In fact, you would continue testing positive for years after that with that type of testing. But with the testing that they do, they specifically look for the presence of the virus. So you would test negative.
Okay, because we did test her anyway, and she was positive.
Yeah,
So-
it could be that she got the virus again, or that you know, it just never went away. As I said, that you actually have people, a few people who actually that happens to. But the vast majority of people, and I know this because where I work, and again, the science of it says so, and where I work, we do a lot of COVID-19 testing. And one of the ways that you get out of quarantine is to test negative. You know, and people, you know, my students who I teach, if they test positive, they have to stay away from class until they test negative. And the vast majority of them are back in class after 2 weeks.
Well, that makes, yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yeah.
I think I'm next. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to be present for all of your presentation, Dr. Welby, but I have another question, and it's related to one that was already asked. So here in Canada, because, and you may have covered this, so I apologize if you already have spoken about this, but here in Canada, because of the scarcity of the vaccine, what they're doing is that they're giving us the first dose, and instead of giving us the second dose 21 to 28 days later, they're telling us that we'll get the second dose up to 4 months after the first dose. Is that something that is scientifically sound?
Is that the AstraZeneca vaccine, or is it one of the mRNA vaccines?
It's it's the Pfizer and the Moderna that I know, because where I work, I'm not a healthcare frontline staff, but I've been able to get it, and that's what they've done. My mother also has had the first dose, and she's waiting 4 months. So there's a lot of us here in Canada who are waiting up to 4 months for the second dose, and we're not sure if it's going to be effective for us to get the second dose after such a long period of time.
Yeah, I mean, my scientific judgment is that it's going to be okay, but it puzzles me as to why Canada has ordered more vaccine than it has people. So it is surprising to me that Canada is having this distribution issue. So in my opinion, it's not that the vaccine is scarce. Canada has vaccines. It has 4 vaccines that have been approved that it has now. So I'm not exactly sure why it is taking so long for Canada to distribute those vaccines. Canada has a pretty decent healthcare system. It's set up for this type of thing. So that slow rollout puzzles me. The vaccines were tested for you to get the second shot in 21 days for Pfizer, 28 days for Moderna. There is no data on what happens if you wait longer. So I guess for the people who are waiting longer, you'll be the test cases to see the level of protection when you wait longer. Again, scientifically, I think it might be okay, but it worries me that they're waiting for that period of time to actually vaccinate, because I don't think there's a reason. There's a good reason. I think they just need to scale up the way they've done it here in the United States, where you're using stadiums and pharmacies, and every place that you go around the corner is distributing vaccines. So I'm just shocked at that.
Can I say something about that? At my workplace.
Let's just let Jean finish.
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, so we're shocked also, and it's interesting because, I mean, it's a political issue that we understand that why the distribution is taking as long as it is. And I think it's very interesting that you're from the United States and you know that we have ordered 4 times more vaccines than vaccinations that we need, but we don't know that here in Canada. So there's some kind of political issue going on, and unfortunately for us as the people who live here, we're kind of caught because we have no recourse but to wait until the vaccination is available for us.
Yeah, interesting. I just searched it here. The US, Canada are among the countries that have ordered the most vaccines relative to their population. This is not new.
Well,
so I just,
it's interesting because I've had my first dose and I don't even have a date for my second. My mother got her first dose in March. She has her date. She has her date for her second in July. So we don't know what's happening, but you know, this is good information. So thank you. I'll let somebody else ask their question.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, you know, in February, I know that Canada had ordered 200 and something million doses combined of these vaccines. Actually, they ordered 84 million doses of Moderna and Pfizer. And that's outside of the AstraZeneca and the other vaccines that they have. So are their orders not being fulfilled? Anyway, I think I'll check it out because this is a little puzzling to me.
Dr. Webley, just want to say Canada has ordered the vaccine, but we had a long delay. We did not get what we ordered in the initial state. They said they closed the facility because they had to build a larger facility. So we were really on the waiting list. And then they started looking into why Canada did not have their own developmental facility for vaccine. So we had a shock in the sense that as a first world country, we weren't able to develop our own vaccine. And then we were on this waiting list. And so in the defense, it's just that we did order, but Canada did not get what we ordered in time.
Sorry.
I would have to disagree. There's no defense here. I think our government has failed us as citizens, and because we are a country that, as you said, we have a really good healthcare system, but the government is failing us because the fact that you can't say whether you can say scientifically that you don't think that the delay is significant, but we don't know for sure that we're going to, when we get this booster shot, that it's going to be effective. And so there's thousands of us just waiting for this second dose, and we don't know if it's going to be even worthwhile getting the second dose. And actually someone made a good point just this week. They said, do we even know that we are going to get our second doses within the 4 months that the government has told us?
Yeah, it will be worthwhile to get it. As to whether or not it's going to level of efficacy that was originally designed to give you, that is the unknown. But whenever you get the second shot, it will add efficacy to your first shot. Yeah. I think is it Kinesia next or?
Good evening, Doctor. Good evening, Dr. Webley.
Good evening.
My name is Dane Ellis. I'm actually using my wife's phone. I'm in Jamaica.
Are you related to the Boswells in Manchester?
Yes, she is.
Okay.
Yes, and those that used to work at NCU.
Yeah, very nice.
I actually work with your sister at North Jamaica Conference.
Oh, my sister Sophia.
Right. So we can talk about that off the air. My question is, because of the shortage of the vaccine in Jamaica, we're primarily getting the AstraZeneca. However, because of the shortage now, we're looking at getting other types of vaccines from wherever we can, because everybody has that similar challenge. My concern is, one, is it good that the population generally gets this variety of different vaccines, and are you able to assess the efficacy and the impact on the population in general? And two, what if I get the AstraZeneca in the first dose and a Johnson & Johnson a second dose? Is that even, does that even make sense? I hope you understand.
Yeah, so no worries. So it's no problem getting a variety of vaccines. You know, in the US, we have 3 different vaccines that people are getting. And, you know, in fact, we're able to choose which one you want. You know, so my wife and I and one of our sons got the Pfizer vaccine. Some other family members got the Moderna. Less people, of course, have gotten the Johnson & Johnson because it's later. So the variety of vaccines in the population is not an issue. The vaccines have all shown very good efficacy. In other words, their ability to protect you from hospitalization and from death is very high for all of these vaccines, whatever the initial percentage of efficacy that it shows, because that's not the primary outcome that you want from a vaccine. The primary outcome you want from a vaccine is that it's supposed to protect you from getting so sick that you have to go to the hospital or you're dying. So I'm okay with that overall. The only question is, will you get enough vaccines to cover? Because Jamaica has been having challenges getting the vaccines, and they got a good number from Canada. I know that they've gotten some that were left over from Africa, but hopefully you have enough people taking the vaccines to actually make it worthwhile. But it should be fine.
Yeah, the second part of the question is, so, okay, let's say we're not able to get any more AstraZeneca. Can somebody who got the first dose as AstraZeneca get a Johnson & Johnson, for example, as a second dose?
That hasn't been tested. And so nobody really knows. And I know that the UK has been trying to do some of those studies, mixing and matching first and second doses, but the data is not out on that yet. I haven't seen it yet. So I would say until there's data showing that, that's not something that would be advised. Because even though you're talking about the same platform, we really don't know what each company did in the modification of their piece of genetic material that they put into these very different viruses that they're giving as the viral vector. So I would say you can't be guaranteed the level of protection until you see what the overall scientific data shows.
All right, thank you very much. And
all right, take care.
All right, bye-bye.
Elder Bernice, I think, is next. Bansi.
Something to show you.
Hello, Dr. Webley.
Hello, Elder.
Yeah, I have a very simple question.
Mm-hmm.
No, I was always curious to know, why is it that they ask persons to isolate for 14 days after they contract the virus, or if they travel outside the country, or if they come in contact with somebody who have the virus? Is it that there's no chances of anyone getting the virus from that person after 14 days?
Yeah, the probability that you would get the virus from someone after that period of time is almost zero. Because by that time, the person should be tested negative for the virus. Even if they still have some small amount of virus in their body, in their intestines and other places, they shouldn't have it in their upper airway where they're, or in their lungs where they're transmitting it. Overall. So in fact, they actually reduced that to 10 days here in the US because the data, the newer data showed that after 10 days it should be gone. So for example, I was exposed to somebody who tested positive because we're in very close association. The person was very close to me, and then the person tested positive on the day that we spent a lot of time working. So I had to quarantine. And so I had to go into quarantine in my house, couldn't be in contact with my family. And so on day 5, after that, I got tested. And then on day 10 again, I had to get tested. After I was cleared for days 5, day 10, then I could be released from quarantine, because the thought was that if you weren't positive at that time, you wouldn't get positive again. And so, and if you were positive and you tested negative on after day 10, then you should be fine. The truth is, if we're doing it right, Elder, we should test 2 times. And those 2 tests should come out negative before the person is actually released. You should test 2 times over a 2-day period to be released. But testing became a big deal where we didn't have enough testing set up. And so people couldn't get as much testing that they needed. So they stretched it out over this 14-day period, knowing that if you tested negative, then it should be okay.
So just a follow-up question. So are you saying that the test that we do is only like for the nostril area?
Yeah, because that's where the sample is coming from.
But you could still have the virus in your body?
Absolutely. I mean, in fact, I have good friends who work on coronaviruses, who worked on the initial coronaviruses, as well as these ones, this new one. And they'll tell you that even after the person stopped testing positive through the nostril, if you swab their anus, do an anal swab, they'll be positive. You're passing it out in your feces.
So that means you're not out of the woods then, if you had it and then you get tested negative.
Well, hence the whole idea of the long COVID, right? That there are people who, after testing negative, even getting better and going home, continue to have these symptoms. It is very likely that for some of these individuals, at the very least, the virus is still lingering in different parts of the body. And they're just now doing research to confirm that. But the anecdotal evidence suggests that that is actually the case. It wouldn't be the only virus to do that. For example, you know, we know for HIV, for example, it does a similar type of thing. You start treating a patient with antiretroviral drugs and HIV, the levels in the blood become so low that the viral load is almost undetectable in many people. But then you stop treating for 2 or 3 days. Just skip the treatments. And then you go back and they're loaded with viruses. Clearly, they didn't replicate all of those viruses in that short period of time. They had the virus in lymph nodes, and lymph nodes are all over your body, like the circulatory system almost. They're everywhere. And especially in the intestines, they're loaded on their armpits and different places. And lots of viruses that infect white blood cells, that infect leukocytes, live in these spaces. And whenever the amount in the blood is low, they just seep back into the blood. And that might be true for coronavirus because it infects so many different types of cells.
All right, thank you, sir.
You're welcome, sir.
Just before you take some questions in the chat, Rebecca, I just want to ask Dr. Webley 2 questions. Doctor, I just want to ask, so as a pastor, I noticed among our members, right, or in our faith community, we have a lot of conspiracy theories, right? And that's really causing a lot of people not to go and get even tested, right? And even to think about the vaccine. So it's a chronic problem. What do you have to say in this regard as a Seventh-day Adventist yourself, and having to deal with this situation? What would you say to the church as we face this pandemic?
Yeah, very good question. Thank you for that, Pastor. I think what people have to realize is that the same God who have given you wisdom and faith is the same God who says he'll protect you. You cannot be so presumptuous as to not use the wisdom that God has given you, expecting that he's either going to miraculously protect you or miraculously heal you from this terrible virus. Again, this is not our first go at it. So I like to bring people back to the scriptures, and doing a webinar with some people from the UK recently, I was made to think a little bit more deeply about this. And so if you go to 1 Corinthians chapter 12, right? 1 Corinthians chapter 12, and if you have your Bibles, you can jump there with me and take a look starting around verse 5 or thereabouts. This is the chapter on spiritual gifts. And we can even read from the beginning there where it says, "Now about the gifts of the Spirit, brothers and sisters, I do not want you to be uninformed or misinformed. You know that when you were pagans, somehow or other, you were influenced and led astray by mute idols." Let's jump down. Verse 4, "There are different kinds of gifts, but the same Spirit distributes them. There are different kinds of service, but the same Lord." Verse 7, "Now to each one, the manifestation of the Spirit is given for what? For the common good." The manifestation of the Spirit is given for the common good. What is the common good? The common good is to benefit everybody around you. That's the common good, to make life better for every person around you. That is what Jesus showed us when he came. He showed us how to live lives that benefit the people around us. So now let's look at the gifts. He says the one is giving the spirit of a message of wisdom. We just talked about that. Wisdom is a gift. You get that wisdom. To another, a message of knowledge, the ability to know stuff, right? I believe I'm one of those people who's been blessed with the ability to know stuff, and to follow it through. And by the same Spirit, right? To another, faith by the same Spirit. And to another, what? Gifts of healing by the same Spirit. Gifts of healing, not just the gift of healing, gifts of healing. Many times we miss that plurality there. It's not just the gift of healing. There's several ways in which you can be healed. For some of us, it might be a miraculous healing that we prayed for. For some of us, it will be healing from a hospital, from somebody who has been blessed to study medicine and could diagnose and treat your condition. For some people, it's going to come from scientists who have worked all their lives to develop a life-saving vaccine so that you can be protected against the virus. The gifts of the Spirit. So this is nothing new. People think, again, as I said, especially among Seventh-day Adventists, I did not realize how militant we were as Seventh-day Adventists and how some of us are just so much against vaccination as if it's vaccination or God. There's no such thing. The vaccine that you're injected with is not what's going to save you from the virus. What's going to save you from the virus is your immune system that God gave to you. This multi-layered immune system that even though we have battered ourselves by not eating right and not living right and not sleeping enough and not doing all of these things, it still works. And when I study the immune system, I tell people all the time, I get really excited because every new thing I learn about it, I walk away saying, wow, fearfully and wonderfully made. Because it is so complex. It is so well organized. However, it has to get what it needs in order to work properly. And sometimes we forget when you go to Acts chapter 3, where Peter and John walks up to the temple and they see this man. And the Bible says that he's sitting there asking for alms, while he's begging money. And what does Peter and John say? They say, silver and gold I do not have. But such as I have, what I have, I give you. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, rise up and walk. Did the man rise up and walk? No, he did not. The Bible makes us know in verse 7 of Acts chapter 3 that they took him by the hand and lifted him up to his feet, and immediately his feet and ankle bones received strength, and then he walked. You see, our idea of gifts of healing sometimes are a little bit strange. And then finally, I want to bring your attention to the book of 2 Timothy. 2 Timothy chapter 4. And let's look there at verse 3. And I'm going to read it for you in the New Living Translation, because I kind of like the way it's put here. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 3. For a time is coming when people will no longer listen to sound and wholesome teaching. They will follow their own desires and will look for teachers who will tell them whatever their itching ears want to hear. Verse 4, they will reject the truth and chase after myths. Verse 5, but you should keep a clear mind in every situation. Don't be afraid of suffering for the Lord. Work at telling others the good news and fully carry out the ministry God has given to you. The ministry God has given to me is to tell the truth about the science that's surrounding these things, not just this, but the science of the things that I've learned over the 30 years that I've been a scientist. And what I see happening now, especially in our Seventh-day Adventist circles, is that there are a lot of people out there who are no longer listening to sound and wholesome teaching. They go and from Facebook to YouTube to WhatsApp, they get all of these things that satisfy their itching ears and their own misconceptions and that align with their own misguided thoughts. And instead of asking God for wisdom to understand it, instead of asking God to show you specifically what the truth is, would you believe it? I was one of those people who said that these vaccines are being made too fast. I will not recommend it or take it until I see the data. And then I saw the data and I read every page of the data. For all of these vaccines, I've sat down and I've read it through. I've gone back and I've cross-referenced and I've checked. And I came away saying, I have read the data and I'm comfortable with the science behind what has led to the making of these vaccines. I did my due diligence. I did it for myself, I did it for my family, and I did it for my church.
Amen.
Yes, I'm not a pastor. That's not how I was trained. But I was trained first at the school of the prophets.
Praise the Lord.
I am first a Seventh-day Adventist and second a scientist.
Amen.
And I will always be true to my God and to my people.
Amen.
And yes, I truly believe that what I do is a ministry.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm in the lab, whether I'm looking through a microscope or culturing some cells or doing some analysis, I see it as me doing my godly service. And so I will say to you, it is okay that you're skeptical. It is okay that you feel anxious and nervous taking something that you're not 100% sure about. But ask questions. Do your due diligence. Look in all the right places, because if you keep looking at social media and because there's some fancy video with a nice music bed, you're going to be led astray. Anybody can make one of those.
Mm-hmm.
What I present to you, the reason why I show you slides, first, if you notice on every single one of those slides, there's a reference as to where that data was pulled. I don't deal in myths and I don't deal in speculations. I give you the straight science. And that's why I come to you with the biology and the immunobiology, because I feel that if you can understand the 2300-day prophecy, and if you can understand the prophecies and the predictions in Revelation, you can understand this little science. Because if you understand this little science, people can't fool you with foolishness anymore. You look at them and say, no, that's not true. The basic biology goes completely against that. It can't be true. And you'll protect yourself.
Amen. And Doc, just as to follow up on that, we have also, the spirit of prophecy enthusiasts, and not necessarily realists, right? And then they are running with the idea as if the Ellen White was against vaccines, and I'm not sure if you saw any of that in the spirit of prophecy. I've never seen it. What is your knowledge there that you can share?
In fact, not only was Sister White not against vaccines, she actually took it herself.
Amen.
She took the smallpox vaccine because for her, in her day, smallpox was the COVID-19 outbreak at that time. People were dying left, right, and center from smallpox. And she took it. So the North American division, I just put a link in your chat. The North American division actually put out an address, a statement addressing some of these myths that people have been putting around. And if you look at the bottom of that statement, you can read the entire thing because it was written for Seventh-day Adventists, by Seventh-day Adventists in collaboration with Andrews University and Loma Linda University, a School of Medicine. You will see there where they specifically tell you that the church is not against you taking the vaccines. It's a personal decision, as I said, because it's a medicine. So if you want to take it, you should talk with your doctor, you should consult with your family and take it. But they make it very clear there that Ellen White actually took the vaccine, right? The smallpox vaccine in her time. So much for Ellen White being against vaccines. Ellen White was a smart woman. And so when she saw people around her dying, she didn't go walking around thinking that by faith she would be protected. Her faith led her to action. Her faith said to her that you had to go and get vaccinated. And so, you know, again, I don't want to seek to tell people what to do in this sense, but I guess my point is that I'm leading you to a place where you actually see that. If you go to 2 Peter chapter 1 and you read from verse 4 down, what the Bible tells you there is that you need to add to your faith. And what are you adding to your faith? There's 7 things there that it tells you that you're adding to your faith, and each one of them is important in your walk with God and in your growth as an individual. So add to your faith.
Thank you. And my final question before I turn over back to Rebecca. For me, I grew up in Jamaica, and we believe in vaccines, right? As a child, I got close to about 10 vaccines, right? And here I am today, healthy and strong, right? It is important. And now I have family back home. And so all of us in the Caribbean, we have our people back home, and there is a great level of distrust where this is concerned. And again, the whole media propaganda is contributing to all of that, right? Now, there is also the fear of the vaccine passport. Now, if I can recall, I had a vaccine passport when I was growing up, which was my immunization card, and even being accepted in certain universities abroad or going to certain countries, that had to be presented, right? If there should be a vaccine passport, right? Is there a difference with it from when I was a child and as opposed to now? And I just want to be very clear that I got my first shot and I'm really just longing for my second shot. You know, I'm in the category 2 that's waiting way too long. So we are hoping that we will see an adjustment in those dates.
Yeah.
But the vaccine passport that many people are afraid of right now and attributing to mark of the beast and all this kind of stuff, how do we kind of address those myths?
Yeah. So first of all, the mark of the beast issue, that link that I just sent from the North American division that has been adopted by the General Conference now, it talks about that no vaccine is going to be the mark of the beast. If people are thinking that the vaccine is a mark of the beast and the requirement for vaccination is a mark of the beast, then you haven't read your Bible carefully. So, you know, that's the first thing. The second thing is, you're right. There's always been a vaccine passport. We just didn't call it that. For many of us, when we were leaving Jamaica to come abroad, we gladly went and got our immunization card. And anyone that we were missing, we got it updated. And anyone that we needed a booster for, we went and got it before we went to embassy. And we gladly displayed it so that we could get our visa to go to the US. And now all of a sudden we're here talking about, oh, you know, I don't want a vaccine passport, you know, and those of you that were getting vaccinated and getting your vaccine, you're a sellout. Really? All of a sudden now? Come on. So here's what I don't want. I think that vaccination is a personal medical decision. And I would hope that no government anywhere, local or a countrywide government will require the vaccine as a passport. But here's what's going to happen. It's already happening. Different businesses are going to require you to have a vaccine in order to work there. Hospitals are going to require you to have a vaccine for the coronavirus the same way they require you to have a flu shot in order to work there. Make no mistake about this. Colleges and universities. My university just on Thursday released information that they will welcome back every student in the fall. Every student needs to be vaccinated. So you're going to have a choice. You don't have to go to a school that requires vaccination, but the vast majority of them are going to, right? And this is going to happen across the board for different businesses, even if a state or a municipality does not require it. So there will be exemptions, of course, because there are people who might not be able to get the vaccine for various reasons. If you have a medical reason, I'm not sure if they will be doing that based on religious reasons. If they're going to do it on religious reasons, Seventh-day Adventists would not be one of those, because as an organization, the Seventh-day Adventist Church is not against vaccination, and specifically is not against a COVID vaccine. So you wouldn't be able to go to your pastor and get a letter. So don't go to your pastor asking for a letter so that you're exempt from vaccination. That's not a legal thing. That is not one of the things that you can get a letter for, right? So again, I'm hoping that it won't happen, but in some places it will happen in spurts, depending on what businesses are asking for. Did Dad have your hand up? Did you put it down? Did your question answered?
So I was trying to ask whether we would require to have that vaccine, like for travel. So I think you basically answered part of that question.
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of countries that are now saying that they're going to require you to have a vaccine, show that you've been vaccinated or got a test within 72 hours in order to travel. That's already happening now. You know, if you're traveling anywhere now, they're asking that you test negative before you travel. If you have a vaccine, they won't ask you to test negative. They'll ask you to show that you had vaccine. And so, you know, keep those vaccination cards handy because it might come in to be useful.
Great, thank you.
Yep. I see a few questions that came to me directly in the chat. Somebody was asking about whether or not I'd mentioned that the initial coronaviruses that we knew were cold viruses. And so somebody was saying that, so the coronavirus is a form of cold virus. Yeah, it's a cousin. You see, viruses have families the same way we do. So, you know, I'm a part of the Webley family. I have brothers and sisters. I have parents. You know, we have cousins. So this current coronavirus is a cousin of some of the initial cold viruses, coronaviruses that we had. And so when one has a cold and goes for a COVID test, can a positive test result come out? No, because the test is designed to specifically look for COVID-19 for this current coronavirus. So my cousin is different from me. So essentially what you could say is that the test is looking for the fingerprint of the virus, and the fingerprints are different for different family members. So you wouldn't test positive because you had one of the other cold viruses. So somebody was mentioning that one of the recommendation that they were given was to take, once they take the vaccine, to increase their intake of vitamin D and C and zinc and drink like Gatorade and stuff like that. None of that is necessary, especially if you weren't even doing that before. So the idea is that we all should eat healthy and balanced diets, right? And if you're taking in the regular amount of vitamin C that you should have, there's no reason to take more. If you're taking in the right amount of vitamin D, either through sunlight or through foods, there's no reason to take more. If your diet is giving you the right amount of zinc, there is no reason to take more. You see, dietary supplements are one of those things that people need to be aware of. Because a certain substance is good, it doesn't mean more is better. We proved this with vitamin A, where vitamin A was shown to protect against certain cancers. And then when people loaded 2 times or 4 times the amount that they should get, it actually increased your risk right? Because of the way the excess is used by other parts of the body. So you have to be careful in that. So if you don't need the supplement, don't take them. You said nothing. No, so I didn't say, somebody was saying here that I say, you know, nothing including faith can cause your immune system to kick in faster. Not your immune system, your adaptive arm of your immune system. Your immune system kicks in immediately, but that's the innate part of your immune system. It is supposed to hold this virus down. What I did mention is that we actually, scientific evidence shows that the virus actually actively suppress the innate part of the immune system. So that doesn't work as well against the coronavirus as it should, right? And so it's not that your immune system itself is not kicking in within until 2 weeks, your natural immune system. So I'm not saying, say the person is saying, are you in effect saying that we are marked for death without this vaccine? No, not at all. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we are in the midst of a dangerous virus that has caused the death of over 3 million people. In other words, this virus is saying, don't play around. I can kill you if you're susceptible, because we don't know who are susceptible. And we know that by the time you get the virus, if you're trying to get the virus so that you can build immunity, that's probably not a good idea, since you could have underlying conditions. Even children we see now developing these syndromes and dying, right? Especially with the new variants. We are having more and more young people getting infected, as I showed you right there in Canada with the new variant. And some of these deaths that we're seeing are being registered in younger people. So I'm saying, if your conscience will allow you to get the vaccine, if you don't have some moral objection to the vaccine for whatever reason, then take the vaccine, because it takes away that doubt as to whether or not you're one of those people who Nurse Rona mentioned might have an almost blocked heart or have hypertension and don't know. And then you get the virus. That would be detrimental. Because in my opinion, I ask you the question that God asks his people: why would you die when I've extended to you life? Why would you die? God has a work for you to do. Why would you die before you're able to accomplish that work? So somebody also asked, if you were naturally exposed to the virus and developed immunity, do you still need the vaccine? And my answer to that is yes, because here's why. When you get the virus, the immune system is exposed to all of the 30 proteins that the virus has made. In other words, to your immune system, the whole virus is like a 10-story building, where the body is making a response against every window, every door, every ledge, on every floor. It turns out that not all of those things are important for protecting you against the virus. The spike proteins are what are important, because that is what the virus uses to get into the door. So while the immune system is busy concentrating on all of these things, and the roof and the canopies and all of these things and the different colors, it's probably not spending a lot of time focusing on the front door, which is what your immune system really needs to ramp up against. What the vaccine does, the vaccine takes that front door and show only that to the immune system. So all of the immune system's resources go to making a response against the front door. So when it sees that 10-story building, it focuses, laser focus on the front door, and it blocks the virus from getting in that front door so that you never get sick, right? So that is why, even if you have been exposed to the virus before, you still need to get vaccinated so you can ramp up the response against that front door. Since yes, you might have a response, but that response might be at a very low level. What the data shows is that 40-something% of people who recovered from the virus within 2 months did not have any noticeable neutralizing antibodies. That's antibodies against the spike protein. That's not good. It means you can get reinfected. So that's why you get the vaccine. Okay. I see no more questions. I hope that means that I've answered your questions. Oh, I spoke too quickly. Casilda.
Hi, Dr. Webley. I have a few questions I want to ask.
Yes.
And thanks for the presentation. Now, earlier on, you said that the AstraZeneca gets in the nucleus of the cell.
Yes.
Is this the first type of vaccine that actually goes into the cell? And the other follow-up question is, what is the difference then between the AstraZeneca and the Pfizer, in the sense that at what level of the body does the Pfizer work?
Yeah, they're basically the same, because they're being made what they are. Both vaccines put a sequence for or the code for the spike protein into your body. They're just doing different ways. So when an adenoviruses are stuff that I grow in my lab all the time. Adenovirus are DNA viruses, which means that they go into the nucleus when they infect you. So this is what the virus does naturally. What they did is that they used the adenovirus as a Trojan horse, Casilda, to take in the genetic material to make the spike protein of the coronavirus, right? So they literally just hid that coronavirus sequence in a completely different virus that can cause disease. So when this virus gets inside of you, it does exactly what it does. It puts this nucleic acid material or its genetic material into the nucleus of your cell. Totally fine. That happens all the time. Viruses do this all the time. What the cell does is that it looks at it and it says, oh, you want me to make a copy of these gene regions of this DNA that you've put in. And so it does. So it makes messenger RNA, that copy of all of those gene regions that came in, not just of the coronavirus, but of this adenovirus that came in as well, because it's a fully structured virus, just that it doesn't replicate. And so it makes messenger RNA that leaves the nucleus, goes out into the cytoplasm to the ribosome, which is the factory in the cell, and the spike protein is made. For the Pfizer vaccine, the messenger RNA is injected directly into the cell and goes to the factory in the cytoplasm where it's made. It never goes into the nucleus, right? Okay. So that's the difference there. Again, the fact that something goes into the nucleus doesn't make it bad. Viruses do that all the time, right? Viral nucleic acid gets into the nucleus of our cells all the time. They integrate. Herpes does it. You know, most of these viral infections, many of these viral infections that are DNA viruses, they enter the nucleus, right? They integrate into our DNA. In other words, they use enzymes like a scissor. They clip our DNA and then zip it back together with theirs in the middle. And when we're making proteins, theirs get made, right? And so their proteins get made and get sent out. So that's essentially how that is made.
Okay. The other two questions I have is, you just mentioned about the body for natural immunity, that the body would be responding to about 30 antibodies against the corona virus in its natural, the natural immunity. And so what the vaccine does is to focus on the front door. My question to you is, if a variant crosses the body and the body is just looking for the corona, which is the front door, just focusing, the immune system is just focusing on the front door, what happens if a variant comes?
Yeah, I mean, so the variants, good question. So it's not that the body only makes 30 different antibodies, it's that the body is responding against 30 different proteins. To any one of those proteins, it could be making 300 different types of antibodies against that one protein. And so when it looks at the door, let's say you have one of those fancy doors with panels, the body is reading every one of those panels. What the variants are is that the variant probably just put one of those fancy decorations in one of those panels, or it takes out one of the little details out of the panel. In other words, the front door is still recognized as foreign, but maybe that part of that panel is one of the parts that the virus actually used to directly bind. So it means that the antibodies that were made against the initial door, not every one of those antibodies will find a binding site on this new door, but they still have binding sites. In other words, it is not as effective, not at 90-something%, but it's probably at 80-something%. And that's still very, very efficacious against a variant. We're hoping, Casilda, that we don't get a new variant. There's a variant in India that is a double mutant variant that's spreading rampantly in India right now. And that is a cause for concern for me. My hope is that we don't get a variant that has figured out how to evade all the antibodies that have been made against the spike protein, because that would be tremendously problematic. They would still be able to build a vaccine against it, but that would of course take time, and it would kill a lot of people by the time that happens.
Okay, true. So I said it was my final question, but something else just popped in my head. So can I ask that before I ask my final question? Okay, so the vaccine, you're trying to train the body to develop the spike protein.
No, the body is making the spike protein because you've given it the instruction to do so.
The instruction to make the spike
What you're
protein.
training the body to do is to respond to the spike protein immediately as it sees it again, not waiting 2 weeks.
Okay, so would you expect then that there might be possibilities of having the person presents with, say, symptoms of the that's similar to or look like actually getting the COVID if you're training the body to respond to the spike protein?
No,
not sure if I'm clear.
Yeah, I understand. Yes and no, because inflammation presents in the same way.
Okay.
In other words, you get fever, right? That's the immune response. So it's not so much that the spike protein is doing damage, is that is the way the immune system responds. The immune system responds by expanding the total number of cells, which say it's a clonal expansion, because it's making that many more cells. That's why it takes so long. You know, it's a replication that's happening. And so as it replicates and the cells recognize that there's a foreign invader, they start firing shots at it. So there's collateral damage, you know, there is damage to tissues in the area. And so you feel that. You feel fatigued because the immune system takes a lot of energy to get ramped up to that level. You'll have chills, you'll have fever, you'll have, so these are things that the virus will also cause for similar reasons, because that's infecting you, the immune system is responding. So to that extent, yes. The damage, however, that you're gonna have from the viral replication in certain tissues, and then a rather big immune response against those is not gonna be there. So that means you won't have the consolidation in the lungs, having mucus being released, having some of this damage in your pancreas, for example. None of those things will happen when you actually get the vaccine.
Okay, thank you. My final question is, what's your recommendation about the COVID vaccine for someone who has had a previous reaction to vaccine?
I would say you should let them know that. That you need to let your healthcare provider know that you've had previous reactions to vaccine. It doesn't mean you're not going to get it. Even people with anaphylaxis, what they do is that they give you a scaled dose. In other words, instead of giving you that 0.5 ml or 300 microliters at one time, they give you a little bit at a time every 15 minutes until it's done. So you can still get your vaccine, because they still believe that the risk of adverse events from the vaccine is outweighed by the terrible risk of dying from COVID. So for example, people who had anaphylaxis in the first dose, where they had to give them an EpiPen, they still gave them the second dose, they just scaled it.
Wow. Wow. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Rebecca, just before you bring the curtain down, I just want to ask Dr. Webley one last question, and this is in regards to the young people, and particularly the areas that are more using the AstraZeneca. Like here in Canada, it is 40 and up. That's recommended for AstraZeneca. Like in the Caribbean, particularly in Jamaica, where that is the vaccine that they're using now, there is a fear among young people to take AstraZeneca. What advice would you give in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, the reason why they lowered the age there for the AstraZeneca was because of the blood clots, right? That's why they made that determination there in Canada. The truth is that although they're seeing these blood clots in younger people, it's younger females.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was advising the government, I would say give it to males at all ages that it has been tested on. So that's from 18 up. And restrict it for females under the age of 50, right? In other words, give them another vaccine. So I would make a deal, which Jamaica now has, where they're going to get either Moderna or the Pfizer. I think the Moderna is what they're going to get. So that's the way I would go about it. Because again, I'm concerned that we don't exactly know why the blood clots. We don't know what the underlying condition is. And this is me just being abundantly cautious because it's very likely Jamaica has 3 million people. So if you should take the statistics, only 3 people technically would get these blood clots, right? So when you put it in perspective, it doesn't seem like it's an existential crisis. But at the same time, I would say I'm still concerned about those 3 people because those 3 people could die if they didn't, especially if they didn't realize immediately what was going on and went straight to their doctors. So at the very least, I would say that the doctors need to be very well informed as to what to look for. And so will the vaccinees, that if you get a vaccine, you need to be told that if you start feeling a certain type of sharp pain, if you're having a persistent headache that make you dizzy, that would be a reason for you to actually go to the doctor immediately. Yeah, I got the vaccine, I'm getting this sort of side effect. So, you know, again, I think that they should continue delivering vaccines in some form or another, but at the same time, do it in a judicious way while still searching for what could be this underlying problem.
Thank you, Doc. Rebecca?
Thank you very much. Well, normally we're over one in these things, but Dr. Webley has managed to answer all of the questions in the chat and here. So that was really impressive. But unfortunately, we've come to the end of the program tonight and would like to say a heartfelt thank you to you, Dr. Webley, for so generously, you know, answering the questions and for the very interesting and rich presentation that you gave us about the pandemic and the vaccine. I'd like to thank everyone as well, church members, friends, guests, for your presence here tonight. I trust that you are all now equipped to make informed decisions about whether or not you should take the vaccine. At this time, I'd like to call Dr. Sonia, who is our Health Ministry Director, to join me for our vote of thanks.
Thank you, Sister Rebecca. Dr. Webley, on behalf of Pastor Montague and the Northwest Brampton Church family, we want to thank you for this excellent, informative, and enlightening presentation that you've given us tonight on this dreaded viral illness, on vaccines, and also on the variants. We've heard so many misinformation, as some of us had indicated, about this disease from the very beginning of this pandemic. And a number of people are very fearful of the vaccine. So we want to thank you for all the clarifications that you've given us tonight and for setting our minds at ease. We truly appreciate you taking the time out to be with us this evening. So may God continue to bless you as you continue educating his people around the world on this pandemic. Thank you so much, Dr. Webley. Before I hand over to Sister Rebecca, I just want to put it out there I have taken the Pfizer vaccine almost a month ago, from March 26th. And I want to let you know, it's an mRNA vaccine, as Dr. Webley has said. And I haven't changed. People are saying, oh, it's going to change you into something. It's going to go into your DNA. But I am here, breathing, still me. And just want to tell you, I have led by example. And as Pastor Webley has said, as Dr. Webley has said, it is your decision. So pray about it, and go with faith. Thank you so much, Dr. Webley.
Thank you so much, Northwest Brampton, for having me. Thank you so much, Pastor Montague, for your accommodation. And thank you, Dr. Corner, as you have said, mRNA vaccines do not go into your DNA. I hope I showed you that when I showed you that diagram of the cell where you have the nucleus different from the cytoplasm. mRNA does not make it in. The other thing you should know is that the mRNA gets degraded once it's read. So is the spike protein that's made. So if I should come and test you 2 months later after you've taken the vaccine, you would have no trace of either the mRNA that was injected in you or the spike protein that it produced. It's gone. I mean, way before that, I'm saying 2 months just as a longer time, but within weeks, you know, at the most, those are all gone from your system. So when people talk about long-term effects from these vaccines, there's nothing in there that's going to stay long-term except your immune response overall. I pray that God will bless you during these tough times. And I pray that what it will teach all of us is just how important we are to each other. Just how much it's important that we care for each other. And a part of that caring is also taking a vaccine that protects one of you who can't take it for some reason or another. And I pray that while we get vaccinated, at least most of us who want to do that from this virus, we will seek to help each other to vaccinate ourselves from sin and from our interactions with the devil, so that someday we will all meet face to face, not via Zoom, in the land made new, where we, along with all those who have believed, will be able to not just sing the song of Moses and the Lamb, but that we'll greet each other and say, hey, you remember that time when we were on that Zoom call? I was there too. I pray that we will all be able to make it to the kingdom, because that is our final goal. May God bless you.
Man, beautiful and powerful closing. Thank you, Dr. Webley. Well, if you are happy and satisfied with the presentation, may I just ask that you use the reaction and give a big thumbs up to Dr. Webley. Thank you. Thank you very much. We also would like to thank you, Dr. Sonia and Pastor Montague, for arranging this. We pray that God continue to bless your ministry here at Northwest Brampton and in the virtual communities as well. So thank you very much. We will hear Sister Heather Mullings once more, and immediately after her, we will have a closing prayer by Elder, or First Elder, Jervin Bansi.
All right. Well, just to say, if Elder Bansi doesn't mind, I have Dr. Reed here with us, and if we could just ask him kindly if he could do the closing prayer for us. I just want to welcome him for stopping by. He's also a good friend of Dr. Webley.
Also, sorry, probably they could pray and then the song could just be played afterwards.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Dr. Reed, welcome to Northwest Brampton, and thank you for stopping by. And a matter of fact, Dr. Reed is the reason why I was able to meet Dr. Webley virtually. So we thank him for this connection so that we could be helped today. Dr. Reed, welcome.
Thank you, Pastor. Thank you, my friend. Thank you, my friend. Dr. Webley, I just came to eavesdrops, man. That's all.
It is good to see you, my friend. It is good to see you.
Good to see you too. So shall we bow our heads to prayer?
Heavenly Father, we are grateful for the privilege of life and the fact that we were able to come together on this platform to learn, to gain a greater understanding of the virus, the variants, and the vaccines that are out there. What all this has taught us is that we're living in a precarious world, and we need to trust you even more as we come closer to the end of time. But until then, Lord, I pray that you will help us to use the mind that you have given us and to do so with wisdom so that we can keep safeguard from all these viruses and illnesses that may be even on the horizon, so that your work can continue to go on and souls can be saved before it's eternally too late. Continue to bless the people of Northwest Brampton and all the guests that may have joined. I pray that you'll also be with Dr. Webley as he shares his expertise, that many more will come to understand the importance of making our Christian contribution as good citizens, not just of the earth, but of the kingdom of God. Thanks for hearing our prayers now, and continue to bless us, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Dr. Anthony Reed, my good friend and brother. Thank you very much. Mr. Rebecca.
Amen. And just before we play the song, if I may, before we play the song, I'd like to share a last invite with you. On May 15, we're going to have another very informative session about Steven Johnson syndrome. So we'll have an awareness evening. So we will be sharing the flyer, but please make plan to be there on Saturday, May 15th. Okay, I don't have the time. It will be in the evening, or it will be at 5 p.m. in the evening, and the flyer will be shared with you. Thank you. Go ahead, Sister Heather.
Are you tired of chasing pretty rainbows? Are you tired of spinning round and round? Wrap up all the shattered dreams of your life, and at the feet of Jesus lay them down. Give them all, give them all, give them all to Jesus. Shattered dreams, wounded hearts, and broken toys. Give them all, give them all, give them all to Jesus, and he will turn your sorrows into joy. He never said there'd always be sunshine, and he never said there'd be no rain. He only promised a heart full of singing about the very thing that once brought pain. Give them all, give them all, give them all to Jesus. Shattered dreams, wounded hearts, broken joys. Give them all, give them all, give them all to Jesus, and he will turn your sorrows into joy. Give them all, give them all, give them all to Jesus.
Amen. Oh, just before we go, I just wanted to be very clear to everybody who came that Dr. Webley didn't ask us for a check to do this. As he mentioned, this is a part of his ministry, and he's doing this free for the church, right? In our response, whatever charity he has, then we can make our own contribution, decisions, contribution route to that, but he hasn't asked us for any payment. So I want that to be very clear.
Praise the Lord. Okay, that's all for tonight. Anybody who's staying online will have to sing.
I think everybody will leave.
Webley, and we'll be in touch. Thank you, Dr. Webley. We'll be in touch.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.